Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
It was the strangest ad Alvin had come across in a month of searching. Need a grandfather for a boy, payment negotiable, and a phone number. The people had gone crazy. The rich people had gone crazy. Alvin resented the computer's mouse over the page. Not only do they have personal nannies, drivers, cooks, housekeepers, now they hire grandfathers. And they find them if they write so confidently about their need. The old man had been looking for a job for several months already. He was completely impoverished with this pension. He himself had lived modestly all his life. This paltry pension would have sufficed for one man, but Thunder. The old man thought not so much about his own welfare as about the health of his faithful friend. The old dog, like Alvin himself, has long been in need of good medical support. The cost of a veterinarian's services was scary to think about. Besides, there were no good veterinary clinics in their remote area. Helen's daughter Helen, a veterinarian, was a great professional, but the consumables, as they now called all medical drugs and dressings, had to be bought for separate money. To take a huge old dog to the city, you need a cab, and not every cab driver will take an animal in the cabin. In short, old people, especially of the dog breed, had a hard time if they got sick. Animal feed has not only become more expensive in recent years, but has reached unthinkable sums. It seemed cheaper to raise a whole bull than to feed a dog or a cat. And Thunder, a dog of impressive size and eats several times more than the owner, but one Spunger, Alvin did not do without. He also fed dogs abandoned by dacha owners because he felt very sorry for them. Betrayed by their summer masters, with the onset of cold weather, these unfortunate animals slowly died, not realizing the proximity of winter. The first to fall ill were the kittens who had not had time to grow up before the frosts. At the same time, their mother cats disappeared somewhere, perhaps surviving as best they could. Squinting their blind, dirty eyes, these abandoned ones crawled out into the weak September sunshine and gained warmth in their fur, but only for a short while. Cold, damp weather would come, and the kittens would disappear somewhere one by one. Adult cats were more viable after all. Nature had endowed them with hunting habits, but even they could not survive the harsh winters. Dogs fared even worse. Loyal to man, they were accustomed to take ready food from the hands of their masters. It was simply impossible for them to get food in the abandoned village in the fall. The villagers did not keep chickens. They did not leave food for their meanly forgotten pets. So Alvin supported them as much as his small pension allowed. He lived in his old dacha. The city apartment was completely ceded to his daughter Helen, who could not arrange her personal life. The old man did not complain. He even liked living at the dacha. No fuss, forest, near the river and clean air, not like in the city. The main thing for an elderly person is peace and quiet. Adult loneliness is not stressful at all. If there are no health problems, it is in youth the soul tears to friends, in a noisy company, to fun and dancing. Every hour, even every minute of communication. Personality absorbs the surrounding world, as if pulling out of it through the environment, the most necessary and important for themselves, and an adult, established man, so much noise is not needed. On the contrary, he has so many thoughts and images in his head, so many things to think about, and yet it would be difficult for a pensioner, in this dacha area almost alone, if not for the joys of civilization. In the village there was electricity, excellent mobile communication, and most importantly, the internet. On any occasion, Alvin went to search engines, read a lot, studied everything that interested him and what he had not been able to do before. He always had a need and could not sit idle for a day. Now that he had finally retired, he was thinking of ways to strengthen his economy, as he called the simple economy, and all the money matters. During the summer months, all the old man's money reserves were exhausted, and he decided to find a feasible job. Don't hesitate, his neighbor told him cheerfully. Jacob, a fat dacha owner, was gnawing furiously with his strong teeth on an apple that had just been plucked from a nearby tree. There's someone to guard the dachas here in winter anyway. Go on, here's a great job for you. Pensioner thought to go and guard, but not so. If before old men worked in these positions, now the easy job was taken by young and strong guys from all kinds of security firms. In the evening, tired from the day's running around the village in search of the bosses, Alvin sat on the porch. The dog, who was nestled near his feet, put his head on his lap. Did Thunder see what was going on? What is so important that they are guarding there, that such strong young men are assigned to the objects? The old man asked, stroking the dog's big head. After all, you have to work on such guys, and they sit there, doing nothing but playing on the phones. He sighed heavily and with a nod, saying goodbye to his friend, who was used to communicating with the dog as with a man. The old man went into the house to think about the next day. In the morning, Alvin again sat down at the old computer and found a couple of phone numbers of organizations, as they say, in walking distance. The first was the construction of high-rise buildings. The new complex was being built just between the city and the village, where Alvin lived for the time being. All that remained was to get the coveted job and to it a salary. Hello. I'm calling you from an ad. I'd like to apply for a job as a security guard. Hello, what have you been doing so far? Why do you want to be a security guard? How old are you? The questions came one after another. Apparently, there were a lot of calls, and a set of questions was prepared for any candidate, and memorized by the questioner to death, so as not to think too long. I worked at the factory, retired. A woman's voice in the receiver didn't let him finish. No, sorry, we don't take pensioners. They hung up on him. Alvin decided not to get upset and dialed the next number. Hello, is this the store? Do you need a security guard? Yes, I do, but did you serve in the army? The male bass on the other end of the line asked him. Grandpa's phone was a cell phone, but he was so used to thinking that on the other end of the line, Alvin even smiled. Oh, honey, when I was in the service, you probably weren't even alive yet. How old are you? His voice became suspicious. 62. Alvin was getting a little sad. He was starting to realize what was going on. I'm sorry, we're in material security. We need young guys who can use weapons and catch up with criminals. I don't think you'd be a good fit. Wow, they catch criminals. Alvin said to himself, carefully hanging up the phone. No customers in the store, just criminals. This guy must have gone straight from the police to the easy bread, or else. He shook his gray head and dialed the next number, the gym, which was not so close, almost on the outskirts of town, 3 kilometers away. Alvin would have agreed to walk there every day, despite his sore legs, just to earn money. Hello, are you looking for a security guard? He started talking. No, we've already found one. A young man's voice answered him cheerfully. Our former coach just got a job. Excuse me, Father. Good luck to you. There were no more suitable jobs on the old people's website, and Alvin had to go back to the strange ad for a grandfather for a boy. It is strange, everywhere refuse, only after hearing about his age, and here even by the voice instantly determined the old people, and here it is written in black and white that it is required exactly grandfather. I decided to call. What the hell is not kidding? I should at least find out What is the meaning of the grandfather's duties? The old man coughed well, so that his voice did not seem so old and creaky, and dialed the number specified in the ad. A pleasant female voice answered, speaking. "Hello, I'm calling from the ad. My name is Alvin." The invisible interlocutor seemed to be very lively. "Hello. Thank you for calling. My name is Clara. You probably thought my announcement was a little strange." Alvin just coughed embarrassedly into the phone, but I can't argue with that. "Alvin, I'd like to talk to you in person, if you don't mind. Where do you live? Is there any chance you could come down here?" "You'd better come to my place," said Alvin. "I live here." He explained in detail how to get to his village and cottage. He pressed the phone and quickly put things in order. Everything was always fine on his plot of land, but inside the cottage, of course, lacked a woman's hand. I changed the tablecloth on the table, cleaned up some abandoned things not subject to prying eyes, even took a towel and wiped off some dust. Then he washed, shaved, put on his new tracksuit, and waited for Clara. Exactly at the agreed time, at 6 p.m., a black Jeep drove up to Alvin's house. A tall man of strong build got out of it. He looked more like a bodyguard than a driver. Opening the door, the driver helped a petite, dark-haired woman out of the Jeep, wearing an elegant pantsuit suitable for the office, but not for a trip to a pensioner's hovel. Nevertheless, the lady walked confidently toward the cottage along the tamped path, already strewn with yellow leaves. Alvin approached the guests with a smile. "Good day to you. Come inside, dear guests." "Hello again," said Clara in an unexpectedly low voice and held out a small, strong hand. The driver nodded briefly and introduced himself. "I am also Alvin." His shake was stiff and as short as the greeting. The host led the guests into the house and offered tea and jam. "Tea makes conversation more pleasant," he explained. "I would love to drink tea, especially with homemade jam." Picked up Clara. "And let's drink tea in your garden. I saw a table with benches there." "Oh, great!" Alvin was pleased. He did not want to show the interior of his cottage, which was not very suitable for such a gorgeous guest. The weather was just fine for early September. The sun was warm, the evening was wonderfully warm and quiet, though in the morning the leaves of the big birches growing in the distance seemed to be falling. Alvin had been drinking strong and fresh tea all his life, adding to it all sorts of herbs, which he had collected over the summer and dried a myriad of them. "Today we have mint tea," he commented, pouring the tea into cups. "I also made my own jam from that cherry tree over there. The berries, see? There are still some left on the top. We should leave cherries for the birds, too." The host also opened a box with beautiful cookies, thoughtfully brought by the guests. The pensioner had never tasted anything like them. The guests seemed to enjoy the view and the fragrant tea, and she gave the jam its due. She looked around the garden with marked pleasure and sighed at the pure air. Alvin, the driver, took his glass of tea and moved closer to Thunder, who had been warned by his host that the guests were his own and should be treated with courtesy. The dog wagged his tail, and the guest turned out to be an expert in canine psychology. The two were also having a good time. Between the old man and the young woman, a warm conversation ensued. "I'm Alvin. I came to you specially to have a look at you at home. At home a man is really open, and you are a hospitable man. It immediately disposes to you. At first glance, everything about you suits me. You do not drink, tidy look in the house, and in the garden you have order, and therefore in the head order. Tell me a little about yourself." "Oh, Clara, my life can't be told in 2 words. I've already lived a long time. The owner of the house smiled sadly. "And you are not in a hurry. I am free from all business for today. The whole evening is free, and you will have a rest from business." My life flowed like all men of my generation, in general. Started Alvin. Finished school, straight into the army. What's it like here? It was considered a disgrace if a guy didn't go to the army, and the service was not like today. A real soldier's service, officers, fathers in fact, then long corresponded with cowworkers, and who continued to be friends all their lives. When I came back, I got a job at the plant and worked as a milling machine operator for 43 years. The work requires neatness, accuracy. I liked it very much. I liked the work very much. "And your family?" the guest asked. Yes, I met my Kathy at the factory. She was still a snotty girl when I went to the army. She was running around in the neighborhood. I didn't even notice her. But when I arrived, I saw her at the gatehouse. I didn't even recognize her. She was so beautiful, and what a golden character she had, except that I was a little jealous when I was young. Alvin laughed embarrassedly. What to say now? It was so long ago. We got married and lived together. Alvin did not like to lie and never deceived anyone, but there was a secret in his life that he had to carry with him. The only person privy to it was his wife, his favorite Kathy. In fact, she was the owner of this very secret. She was also the cause of her husband's secrecy, the only one in question. Alvin, then a young demobilized man, actually met Kathy at the factory gate. They stood in line to mark their passes during the largest gathering of workers before their shift. Alvin hardly recognized in the beautiful girl, with wavy blonde hair and blue eyes, his little neighbor who ran with a briefcase to school. He noticed and remembered her, and in the following days he habitually picked out her pretty figure from the crowd. He himself did not notice how he began to wait for her involuntarily, at first just to see her. Then he began to greet the girl with a nod of the head and a smile. Furthermore, the first lines of greeting began, conversations like, "We are on the way, neighbor." The young people reached out to each other, unexpectedly. That's how it always happens when the heart is waiting for love. Only Kathy could not raise her eyes and look at Alvin directly. She always looked away sadly, although it was obvious that she was also waiting for unplanned meetings on the way to and from work. Alvin started dropping by Kathy's house to ask her to a movie or a dance. The girl shyly refused, but her mother, seeing Alvin as a son of good parents, sent her daughter to take a walk with him. Go on. There's no need to spend your youth sitting by the window." They went to the movies, went to dances, ran to a distant forest for berries, later for mushrooms. Only Kathy was sad more and more every day. One day Alvin talked about the future. "Kathy, that's when we'll be married." He started. Suddenly Kathy sobbed, so desperately and violently that Alvin was confused. "What is this?" He put his arms around her. "What's the matter with you?" "I didn't hurt you, did I?" Kathy wrenched herself out of his arms, crying furiously, wiping her red, swollen face with her fists, and was utterly inconsolable. He sat her down on the trunk of a fallen tree, gave her some tea from a small thermos, and kept silent, barely calmed down, blowing her nose loudly into Alvin's same handkerchief. Kathy muttered muffledly as if to herself, "If we don't get married, we'll have nothing, Alvin. I'm spoiled." Alvin froze for a moment, not understanding what she said, and then he grabbed her in his arms and spoke. "What's this nonsense, Kathy? But where did you find such a word? You're the nicest one I've got." Hugged her tightly and didn't let her go until she started crying again. Only then, with a second burst of tears, did she manage to tell of her trouble, which had been burning her all these 3 summer months while she had been conversing with the young man. By some terrible irony of fate, this misfortune happened to the girl right on the eve of Alvin's return from the army. Saturday afternoon. The young people from their shop had gathered for the birthday party of one of the girls, Lena. Kathy didn't know all the guys very well, but they had been in close contact with Lena for a long time, and with the permission of her parents, also went to a small dacha, where Lena organized her party. At first it was fun. They played, sang, danced. Then a few couples scattered around the plot and nearby bushes went for a walk. Kathy, who was taking part in such an adult party for the first time, felt very tired. She went up to the attic of the cottage and, taking off her sandals, lay down to rest on the sofa. She had visited Lena before and felt confident. The girl did not notice how she fell asleep under the muffled conversations and shouts of the guests. Suddenly waking up, hers was eerie. Something heavy was lying on top of her. She couldn't even move or breathe. As she tried to crawl out from under the weight, Kathy felt rough hands covering her mouth and the stench of vodka booze. Thomas? She was horrified to recognize the new mechanic who had recently joined their shop and had been stalking her with savage persistence since her first days at the plant. It was rumored that he had a very murky past. Often the same odor of booze followed him on Mondays when he stood in the gatehouse. Kathy huddled under his long, heavy body in terror, but there was nothing she could do. She was just a silly little mouse caught in the claws of a predator. Gasping, the girl tried to at least bite the dirty palm that covered her mouth, but to no avail. Nearly fainting from lack of air, she twisted and twisted, but it was too late. She realized there was no escaping her rapist. Then a stunned Thomas was heard. "What are you? What are you, a girl? What a surprise. Just keep your mouth shut, okay? No one will know." Kathy cleaned herself up almost indifferently and turned her back to the wall. She spent the night in stupor, silently pretending to be asleep. In the morning, without giving the appearance of feeling unwell, she went home with everyone else. Noting that Thomas and his buddy Jacob were gone, run off or drunk somewhere, God help them. She wasn't interested in anything. Kathy was out of reality. Only her shell retained the ability to smile, talk, and pretend to be alive. To her mother, who started asking about the birthday party, she said, "Yes, Mother, it was very good." Kathy scrubbed herself in the bathtub with a stiff washcloth, but she could not consider herself clean enough. She could feel Thomas's dirty fingers on her white skin, on her belly, between her legs. The nights passed in agony, and later the girl realized that this was not all. She found herself pregnant by a man she hated. Now she had to hide from people, first of all, from her parents, morning sickness, bizarre choice of food. She couldn't eat her former favorite cheese, cottage cheese and sour cream. The last few weeks had gotten bad with clothes, her belly growing and not interfering with her maiden dress and skirts. Kathy had been drawn to Alvin from the first time she met him, as if he was the only reliable support during those dreadful weeks and months. So terribly mixed up in her life, the misery of her rapist and the happiness of renewed acquaintance with her former mere neighbor, Alvin, that her head was spinning. To master the situation, to decide to make some changes, young Kathy was in no way able. Alvin listened to the whole story with a coolness that surprised the girl. Then he asked, Thomas, where is he?" "I don't know. He ran away somewhere. They say he goes away and comes back a lot. Well, let's go to yours and decide about the wedding," just said Alvin. "Mine are always on my side. A child is happiness." About this Alvin could not tell not only to today's guest, but also to anyone in the world, including his favorite daughter Helen, and he continued his story. There was no time to relax. Soon Helen's daughter was born. While they were raising their daughter, building a dacha, and planting a garden, they did not notice how time was running away. In time, we got an apartment from the factory. Since both spouses have been working for a long time, they gave us a comfortable, good apartment in the city, right in the center. We lived frugally, of course, but we were not poor, but still, we took our daughter to the sea a couple of times. Everything like people. Why don't you live in a city apartment? Clara asked. It would be more convenient for an elderly person in the city, and friends and relatives probably remained, and also the clinic nearby if suddenly there are problems. As I buried my wife a couple of years ago, I felt bad. Slaga. Lowering his head, the old man answered, everything reminded me of her. All our friendly years were remembered. I felt sad, and my daughter had grown up. She had no luck with family matters. Her husband turned out to be unreliable, a drunkard. She left him before it was too late. She decided it was better to be alone than to waste her life with a drunkard. So I decided to leave her there, in her home apartment, and I moved here. It's nice here. Spreading his arms, Alvin sighed widely and freely. I'll always find something to do here. There are plenty of neighbors in the summer. Every now and then they call me to help with something. In general, I'm a man in demand in the summer. I can help someone with a car, someone with a fence or a shed. Fix it, nail it. Men's hands are always needed in the village, and there is enough work in my garden. In the vegetable garden, I grow all my own. In winter, though, it's a bit boring, and I want to work. I've got Thunder. He needs good treatment and food. Doesn't your daughter come to see you? Why, yes, she does. Alvin wanted to take offense. She comes, cleans up, does the laundry. What else can she do? Sometimes she takes away the gifts of her native land, as they say, but she's always busy. She works as a veterinarian. She has a love for animals since childhood, from me, apparently. My daughter and I have always, then a sparrow, fallen nursed, then kittens picked up and put. That's why she decided to study to become a veterinarian, to help our lesser brothers. And my Grom, he is also one of those dogs that are abandoned by their owners when they go abroad. And this happens? Surprised guest. How could it be? There is no worse traitor than a man who tamed an animal and abandoned it. Alvin replied angrily, You should see how many abandoned cats and dogs are left in our village when their owners go to the city. They have a friend, a temporary vacation, you know? And then they go to the city, don't care about yesterday's friends, and animals in an empty village without people's help. How are they supposed to survive? Alvin was not on the point of getting nervous, having touched on his sore subject. That's what I wanted to do. I've got a lot of them here, loyal friends, all hungry. Oh, is that what this is about? Clara gasped. Yes, my Helen saw Thunder and couldn't resist. One day, very wealthy people came to her clinic and asked her to put the dog to sleep. A healthy, beautiful German shepherd. How could they just kill him like that? Helen Mine was just numb with indignation and horror. The owner of the dog didn't want to hear anything. People like him, you see, only hear themselves. All the more that tickets abroad for Grom's owners had already been bought, and they were not going to cancel the trip. Helen Auer only waved her hand, did not even look at the bill thrown by the owner. How can you evaluate life and death? The owner left without saying goodbye. Well, Helen left Grom, hoping to attach to good people, but no one wanted to take an 8-year-old dog, even for free. Helen Mai, as she saw Grom, so and attached, but to take to himself in the city apartment, of course, could not. wanted later still to find for him the owners. Daddy asked me to take him for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. How can I help my daughter? I look at the dog, and his eyes are so sad, as if asking, why did they do this to me? Are you like that too? Believe me, Clara, I felt so ashamed in front of him. Not for me, of course, but for his heartless owners. I realized he was my dog. I immediately fell in love with him, and here we are, 2 old men. What a wonderful daughter you have, Alvin, said the touched guest. It's right, you brought her up. My pension is small and thunder, and I don't have enough, so I decided to look for a job. Now I have a question for you, Clara. Why do you need a grandfather? I think, with your financial situation, you could hire nannies, teachers, or whatever they are, governesses for the boy. The woman smiled, an open, clear smile. Well, my Adam hasn't needed babysitters for a long time. He's 9 years old, but we have a problem with Alvin. My Adam is disabled. He's in a wheelchair. My son was born a normal child. Everything was fine, but only just. I'll start at the beginning. Tell me about it. Alvin prepared to listen. I'll start with the frank. Adam was born without a father. Because of my serious work and busy schedule, nothing worked out with men. Some people see that I have a character, you must admit, strong-willed. They were afraid they'd live their whole life under my thumb. A strong woman, you see, doomed to loneliness. Others, there is such a type, drooled over my property, dreaming how they will live for many years without poverty. So many years have passed in labor. It would seem everything is prosperous in my business, but happiness in my personal life as was not. And no, I couldn't find a man to marry, so I decided to have a child for myself. Well, that's your right, Alvin said. Things happen in life. The main thing is that you have a son. Of course, the woman said hotly. I was happy, Father Adam. He does not even suspect the existence of a son. I made up my mind. The fact is that he is a family man, quite established, a successful businessman. I met him through my work. We had common projects. I don't feel comfortable telling you too much of my personal life. Maybe you don't need it at all. But today I want to be frank. Do you understand, Alvin? Of course I understand. That's what Alvin said. Please tell me everything. Don't be shy. Sometimes it's important to tell someone. Yes, it is. I'm used to dealing with things on my own. My mom wasn't much help with that sort of thing. Maybe she wouldn't even accept my decision to have a child out of wedlock. But this man, it seemed to me that he would be a good fit for my life. He was so reliable, independent, and strong, but by that time, he had a wonderful family, growing children, already school children. I didn't want to cause these beautiful people any grief, you know? Why should I destroy his already established family happiness? And I decided not to say anything to him. I would manage alone, so that there would not be any problems that would interfere with the normal life of my son and me. I gave birth so easily, I was as happy as possible. Everything was good. My business was booming. My mom and nanny were helping raise the baby. So the boy was born and grew up healthy? Her interlocutor asked a question. Yes, everything was going fine. When Adam finished the first grade, I bought a trip to the islands for mom and son to have a rest. That's where the trouble happened. My grandmother died in front of my son. Suddenly, not even expected illness, a heart attack. Adam was shocked, stressed, and on this ground his legs failed. Doctors do not find any pathology. We have not consulted with any medical luminaries. We did not hear anything definite. They all refer to the stress of the child. What only doctors and healers I did not take my son, no one gives no prognosis, only divorced hands. The reason, apparently, is purely psychological. Whether Adam will go again or not is unknown. Some neurologists say that perhaps with some more stress, he could suddenly stand on his own 2 feet. There needs to be some kind of push that can help the boy, but no one guarantees a positive outcome. And what if the next stress, on the contrary, aggravates Adam's condition? No one would take a risk in such a case, supported Alvin. That's why my son and I have to be prepared for any eventuality. Adam needs a lot of strength to become a real man, to feel like a full man. I want my child to have a future, to be able to continue my business and build a happy life for himself. But there seems to be a perfect example in front of him, his mother. The old man spoke up. "Ah, my dear Alvin, that's when I realized the meaning of the word fatherless. When I was young, I didn't realize how the absence of a father would affect my son. It's still a discreet but purely female environment, you know. The child grows up petted, sees the world from a woman's point of view. Adam needs a man around him with experience, not today's young men who often grow up under mom's skirt and then cannot get rid of this skirt. Mama's sons, such are not able to be responsible for the family, and what a family, they cannot answer for themselves and even provide for themselves. My son, he was born, apparently, so nervous and taking everything to heart. It is especially important for him to be strong. Plus, he has a delicate soul. We need someone like you. After all, our Adam has never had the confidence of a grown man, and he needs it. So, do you agree?" "I agree." Without hesitation, Alvin answered. During the time they were talking, Clara opened up to the old man completely, and he could not help but feel her pain for her only son. He was even more struck by the woman's frankness, her complete defenselessness in front of a man she had met for the first time, her invaluable trust. Just like my ward animals, it seemed inappropriate to compare Alvin. How could one fail to justify such trust? The businesswoman immediately began to plan for future cooperation. She instantly picked herself up, opened a small notebook, which she took out of her purse. "In the morning, Adam has a school program, and by 2 o'clock he will be waiting for you. A driver will come to pick you up and take you home at 8 p.m. Would that be okay with you?" "Yes, of course, that would be fine." Alvin nodded his head. Then they discussed the payment. The sum named by Clara was much more than the old man had expected. Alvin was discouraged and even shocked. Slava stood up from the table and again became a real business lady, strict, even haughty and unapproachable. Outwardly it was manifested in a slightly stronger compressed lips, proudly raised head, even her height became as if higher. After saying goodbye, the woman left. Alvin was so tense that he was preparing in advance for the upcoming sleepless night. He was very tired from the long conversation. It had been a long time since he had had to empathize with such deep feelings of another person, and he couldn't believe that he would get such money for working as a grandfather. "Well, Thunder, let's get on with it." He patted his pet's head. "We'll find out tomorrow. Old people often worry about all sorts of things. They tend to sleep badly both after good news and bad news." Alvin was no exception to the rule, and after seeing his new acquaintance off, he couldn't sleep for a long time, tossing and turning in his not wide bed and imagining tomorrow morning, what it would bring him, how he would cope with his new position as a grandfather. It's easy to say, but in fact, the task is very, very difficult. Will he be able to find a common language with the boy? Will Adam like to communicate with a strange old man? That's the challenge. Alvin did not think that in his old age he would want to like someone. Grinning at the unexpected thoughts, the old man turned on his left side and finally fell asleep. He woke up early, as was his habit, with a feeling of lightness and some good feeling in his soul. Then he remembered, I'm going to work today. I'm going to meet a nice guy. He quickly prepared a simple breakfast, fed Thunder, and cleared the table. He was on time. At the appointed time, a car came to pick up Alvin. Alvin's driver honked the horn and looked out the window and waved to Alvin. Good morning, Alvin. Ready? Yes, Alvin. I'm on my way. The old man replied, and turning toward the dog kennel, he ordered, Thunder, you're in charge. Keep order. I'll only be 8. Don't miss me. He locked the flimsy cabin door for good measure, put the key in the usual place he and Helen knew about, and ran off the porch. A black Jeep drove them to Slag's house in a matter of minutes. Already at the entrance it became clear that the neighborhood was very prestigious. A high fence limited the part of the building. They had to pass through a closed gate with a barrier, at which stood a guard. In a booth at the gate was a telephone set. That's what I got, mumbled to himself Alvin, and said aloud, It's like a closed town here. Yes, answered Alvin with his usual laziness. We've got celebrities living here. They're afraid for their lives, you see. Alvin felt a little uncomfortable, to say the least. He did not like to enter an unfamiliar space on a bird's license. The farther they drove into the buildings, the higher the houses were, the more imposing the fences, and now it was not houses, but whole castles rising among the trees. Alvin had never seen such wealth before, except in the movies, and he felt a little shy. The house in which he was to work was also large and beautiful. Alvin led him up the front stairs to the door and held out his hand, inviting him in. Mary, we're here. He shouted loudly into the back of the house and immediately turned and walked away to his car. Alvin was a little afraid to tread on the shiny parquet floor and probably looked confused, but help came in the form of a ruddy, full-figured woman in a white apron who appeared out of nowhere. Hello, my name is Mary. I'm the housekeeper. And you are, as I understand, Alvin. She smiled and extended a big warm hand to introduce herself. Yes, the old man said quietly, looking around at the ceiling mirrors and the chic decorations of the lobby. Don't be shy, Alvin. Mary smiled even wider. We are expensive and rich here, but we have simple relations. Everything is human. You'll get used to it in no time, you'll see. Mary went to the big open door to the rooms and called loudly, Adam, Alvin is here to see you. From the back of the room, an exclamation sounded. Then there was a soft squeak of wheels, and a light wheelchair rolled into the lobby, in which sat a thin, dark-haired boy, easily recognizable as Slag's son, the same warm look in his brown eyes, the same smile. But only a person lucky enough to see the boy's mother in such openness as Alvin had during yesterday's conversation could see the resemblance. The boy approached his guest and smilingly extended his hand. Hello, Alvin. I'm Adam. The old man shook the boy's skinny hand and said, Well, hello, Adam. You can call me Alvin, or you can just call me Uncle Alvin. Well, come on, I'll show you my room, said Adam and rolled forward, at the same time telling about his home. The boy was obviously happy to meet the new acquaintance and wanted to present his favorite corners as much as possible. Alvin looked at Adam with attention and as if he saw himself as a child. He had no experience with boys, no sons or grandchildren yet, but looking into the child's lively face, he vividly recalled his childhood years. What was he curious about? What could he interest the little acquaintance in? And Adam did not seem to be thinking at all. He was showing the guest his household with joy. On the contrary, he showed Alvin his new computer. Do you use the computer? Asked the boy. I have to, but I have a very old one. The man answered. Alvin watched with interest as the boy quickly tapped the keys and typed the necessary words in the search engine. The first word was router. Adam wanted to show his grandfather the possibilities of Wi-Fi. Come on, Adam. Alvin rushed to him. Explain to me again, how can I connect to it? His daughter gave him a good smartphone for his birthday, and now Alvin was, as they say, armed with the latest knowledge through the internet. But he didn't have Wi-Fi in his cabin, and he was happy to learn from Adam about its possibilities. The men had a lot to discuss before Mary called them to the table. They talked as equals. Alvin had no time to marvel at how much Adam knew. They went to the kitchen, where the table was set for two. You're welcome, Mary said in a friendly voice. It was obvious that she was glad to have a new face in the house. Inviting the guest, Adam. Mary always feeds me an afternoon snack, Adam said. We have dinner with Mom. That's later in the evening. Mom is always at work. Sometimes she comes late, and I wait for her. That's when Mary scolds us. How can you not? You'll get sick to your stomachs living like this. Mary grumbled good-naturedly. The child is hungry. He's bored to eat dinner alone, and Clara is burning with work, forgetting everything. How can you do that? Yes, war is war, but dinner is on time, as they say. Caught up with Alvin. Adam, you should grow up, eat properly. All your strength goes into growth. At your age, now's the time to build muscle. Yes. Adam was surprised. And how to build them? Is it to be like wrestlers or heavy athletes? And that, my dear fellow, is to eat more meat and vegetables, answered Alvin. And exercise, strengthen arms, legs, food should be well mastered. Then he realized that he had talked about arms and legs for nothing. But looking at the child's interested face, he continued, Here is my daughter treats animals. She is my doctor, only veterinary. She has cats and dogs and even birds in patients can be. So she prescribes them just such a diet to recover faster, meat and vegetables. He continued to pour out details from Helen's practice, seeing the interested look of the small interlocutor. Adam looked at him with all his eyes, not forgetting to chew scrambled eggs with greens and drink cocoa. Mary was sitting next to him, propping her chin on her fist, looking at them with quiet amusement. But then she realized, It's good to be with you, but I have to cook dinner for someone. And she went to the stove. Does your daughter cure horses? Meanwhile, Adam was asking, She does, doesn't she? Answered Alvin. Last year the circus came, and their horse was sick. It was capricious, didn't eat anything. Then it went completely sick, but you have to do the program. Yes, what kind of circus is a circus if the horses don't perform? They're a team, you know. They can't perform without each other. Did they bring her to your daughter? The boy's eyes went wide. No, Adam. Alvin shook his head. The poor horse had no time to travel. She wasn't feeling well at all. Helen came and sat by her, talked to her. I don't know what the horse told, but only my daughter realized that the horse's stomach was not working. And the horse, you know how big it is. Laxatives, at least a bucket of them, I think. I didn't ask you exactly, but the horse came back to life in an instant. Just like that? The boy laughed. Yes, just when it was all right, answered Alvin. But the horse could have been lost, because guess what it ate that wasn't supposed to? I don't know, Adam thought. Carrots, potatoes? Well, she could have eaten carrots and potatoes, especially if she had eaten green potatoes that had been in the sun for a long time. But it was worse. The workers did not see to it and left a bucket near this young mare, in which they washed carrots with a washcloth. Together with carrots, she managed to swallow a piece of loofah. This loofah was the cause of the horse's illness. You, disappointed, stretched Adam. How come? That's it. The old man spread his hands. That's how it happens when someone is not working hard enough, not in good faith. And why cannot green potatoes to the horse? Asked Adam. You see, in the sun and the potatoes, the strongest poison is formed. It's called solanine, explained Alvin. Such poisonous potatoes should not be eaten by anyone, neither humans nor animals. It is very easy to get poisoned. Mary, Mary! Suddenly Adam shouted, Where are our potatoes? Not in the sun. Frightened Mary, in her haste, did not understand what Adam was asking and answered off topic. I'll cook the potatoes too, Adam. Do you want them fried or boiled? No, I don't need potatoes. I'm just asking if they're in the sun. No, Adam. Mary was surprised at the question. We keep them in the cellar. She looked questioningly at Alvin, but there was no time for conversation, and again the men were left alone. Alvin stacked the dishes neatly in the sink of the sink. Well done, Adam. You've eaten everything. Even my Thunder wouldn't have anything to lick. Who's that, Thunder? Adam asked. That's my dog. He's my only companion in the house, Alvin replied. Don't you live with your daughter? Surprised the boy. No, my daughter works in the city. There is her veterinary clinic. Her patients are waiting for her there, and me and Thunder live here in the village in a cottage. What kind of dog do you have? Does it live in the house or in the yard? Adam was curious about everything. Well, it is uncomfortable for a big dog to live in a house. Thunder, I have Freedom loves freedom. He has a huge yard at his disposal, and at night I let him off the chain, and he roams all over the garden. He's a good boy. Helen brought him to me for a reason. Did your daughter give you a dog? Adam was surprised again. Well, whether it was a gift, I do not know. The thing is that my daughter has been picking up all the animals and birds since she was a little girl and putting them back to their owners, and this dog was put to sleep by unkind people when they went abroad, you know. They will live there beautifully, and they didn't need the old dog, so Helen took pity on him and asked me to take him in for a while. And he and I, two old men, became such good friends that now I can't even imagine my life without him. How great! Adam marveled. And I want a dog so much, but my mom says she can't handle it. Mom has no time. Mary also has no time. They said that the dog should play with it, walk it, and he pointed sadly at his feet. Suddenly the boy raised his head. A light shone in his eyes. Alvin, will you introduce me to Thunder? Of course, if Mommy lets me. In the evening Clara arrived. She was very eager to know how her son's acquaintance with his grandfather had gone. And all day long she was impatiently looking at her watch. She had a lot of things to do and wanted to go home. She barely waited for Alvin to pull up in front of the house and got out of the car. Alvin, whom the driver had to take home, was already ready to leave. Adam was sitting next to him in his stroller, his face lighting up at the sight of his mom. Mommy, can I go at Alvin's tomorrow? Clara acted to herself. Wow, the son is already going to visit. So the acquaintance had taken place. The woman was overjoyed that the men had become friends. She greeted Alvin warmly and asked how the day was. Fine, Mom, said Adam quickly. I found out about Thunder. I want to see Alvin's dog. May I, Mom? The mother didn't recognize her usually reserved and bored son, her face flushed, her eyes burning, and the expression of joy on her pale face pleased her most. She laughed. All right, as long as it's not too much trouble for Alvin. Adam, have you been so impertinent as to ask for a visit? Oh, come on, Clara. Alvin was embarrassed. I'll be only glad, and Adam will be really good at my place. He and Thunder will make friends, I'm sure." They agreed that in the morning Adam would go to classes as usual, and at 2 o'clock Alvin would bring him to Alvin's house. After saying goodbye to everyone and glancing at the kitchen window, where Mary's silhouette could be seen, Alvin got into the car and Alvin drove out of the yard. Thunder greeted him with a joyful bark, missing him. "Well, Thunder, now we'll work together." Alvin spoke, putting a bowl of food in front of him. "I'll be the grandfather, and you will be Adam's pets. He is a good, kind boy, and smart to what I am at his age." Alvin laughed softly and waved his hand. The old man was so full of impressions that he didn't even eat dinner. Mary had a good meal today. He sighed. A woman's cooking, yes. After a quick drink of tea with whatever was at hand, he drifted off to sleep, but before his eyes were the boy's shining eyes, the mirrored walls of the fancy house, and the full hands of beautiful Mary. He smiled at this vision and sighed. Life seemed to be getting better. Alvin, as always in anticipation of any guest, began to clean up first thing in the morning, first around the cabin, then inside. He swept the already clean paths, tidied up Thunder's kennel, rinsed his food and water bowls. He did not like this time of waiting, when there seemed to be nothing to do, but his heart was still pounding, where he had overlooked, where he had left a mess. To distract himself, he began to go through fishing gear. The time would pass faster and the heart would calm down, because for an elderly man, any event brings a lot of excitement. Alvin delivered Adam on time. It had only been half an hour since his class had ended. He easily pulled out the stroller and put the boy in it. Adam, looking around and worrying, rolled down the path towards the cabin, but immediately stopped. "Thunder!" he breathed out. The dog looked directly at the boy with her intelligent eyes, alert with her beautiful ears. She licked her lips and Adam laughed. "Well, Thunder, meet him," said Alvin to the dog. "This is our Adam. This is your own. You will serve him as you do me. Do you hear?" He rolled Adam's baby carriage closer to the dog. "Well, here he is. Thunder, Adam, socialize." The boy looked up at him. "Can I pet him?" "Of course you can," Alvin replied. The boy slowly reached out his skinny hand and with a careful movement, placed it on the dog's big head. "Thunder," he breathed out. The dog licked his hand and laid his head near the boy's feet. Adam leaned down and continued to stroke Thunder's thick fur. It seemed to him that he could sit like that all day, but Alvin was already calling his guests for tea. Mary had sent some apple pie with Alvin, by the way, so the tea party was a success. It was held in the same place where Clara had sat the other day with her host at a table in the garden. Thunder watched them from his seat, squinting his intelligent eyes and wagging his tail. In the fresh air, Adam's appetite was great, even took a deep breath after lunch. "Ooh, he's full. Shouldn't we guys go to my daughter's veterinary clinic?" Alvin suddenly suggested it. "Alvin, you're with Adam tonight, right?" "Yes, that's what Clara ordered," answered the mighty Alvin in a bass voice. "Let's go, the weather is great. The day is wasted. Come on, come on." And he began to put Adam in the car with jokes he only managed to shout. "Bye, Thunder, I'll come to you." The veterinary clinic struck Adam so much that he kept silent for a long time, only listening attentively to Helen's story. The girl was not expecting guests, but was pleased with her father and his friends. "This is how we work," she said, showing Adam treatment rooms, devices and couches for four-legged patients, and special devices to hold patients in the right position. It would be nice, of course, to update a lot of things, to make repairs, but the boy saw a lot of animals that were receiving medical care. Helen also showed the shelter where the animals are waiting for their owners, who have to leave them here for a while. Adam was particularly impressed with Adam, a ward for abandoned animals and birds that had been abandoned by their previous owners. There were also those who had been found, brought in by kind-hearted passers-by. Veterinarians helped them, but they could not arrange permanent residence for these pets, and the poor creatures had to huddle in a small adapted room, where it was dark and quite cramped. Unfortunately, we don't even have any money for them. With a heavy sigh, Helen said, "We feed them what we can. It's a pity for them." The boy was so amazed by what he saw that he drove home in silence. When he was brought home, he waited impatiently for his mother. Finally, she entered with a smile to her son. "Well, what news do we have today?" "You know, Mom, I've been waiting for you so much," declared the son. "I wanted to ask your permission. Can I give my money to feed the animals?" "Wait, what animals?" The woman was surprised. "There, at the veterinary clinics at Helen's, the animals there have nothing to eat, you know? They don't get any money for food, Helen said so." The boy told his mother for a long time about his impressions, about the house, about the abandoned animals. She looked at her son and her heart was warm. She did not expect that the little heart of her child was so kind. "Do you want to help them?" She finally asked when Adam had finished his story. "Yes, I broke my piggy bank. There is a lot of money in there." "What do I need it for?" "I've got everything, Mom, don't I?" "You do." His mother answered him affectionately and stroked his head. "You have a good heart, son. I'm proud of you." "So it's okay." The child's eyes shone. "Well, of course you can, because it's your money. You can spend it as you wish, and it's a good thing." Clara was shocked by such an independent decision of her son. The woman saw in what an elevated mood the boy was. "And this is for 2 days of getting to know Alvin," she thought. "No, I did everything right. A man with invaluable worldly experience. A decent man. It shouldn't have happened. I hadn't made a mistake in choosing my grandfather." Meanwhile, Alvin, too, was under a strong impression of the last days of his life. His regime had changed. His surroundings had grown wider. There were new good people around him, and most of all he was happy to communicate with them. It was easy for him to be with Adam. He felt like he was in a distant childhood when everything was easy and simple. They talk, play, socialize with each other, and they don't need anyone else. How could anyone get paid for something like that? The next day, after a day of work, Alvin headed resolutely towards his employer as soon as she got out of the car. "Clara, I somehow got confused and didn't ask what exactly are my duties." He addressed her. "We've only talk and have fun with Adam." "I can't get paid for that, can I?" "No, Alvin, you don't have any special duties. Don't come to us like a job, but like your loved ones, if possible. Talk to Adam like you would talk to your grandson. He's been like family to me from the first minute, Clara. The old man's in a hurry. He's easy for me, but that's the most important thing." The woman interrupted him. "Adam's male influence comes in handy. He's so decisive with his savings. He's a real man." And she laughed happily, and Alvin sighed in relief. It had been 3 months since Alvin had been a grandfather. Every day he became more and more attached to the boy, and Adam responded to the old man in the same way. Mary, the housekeeper, only smiled at the two of them, a lonely woman who had also long lived with the interests of her adopted family. She loved Adam as much as if he were her grandson. She had been unlucky in life. Her husband was a drunk and abusive man. Mary's child died in infancy. Eventually, Mary ran away from her husband and took up residence in someone else's home, which became her own. And now she gave all her unspent maternal warmth to the mistress of the house, Clara. Recognizing in her young self, lonely, strong, but also wanting warmth and love, when Alvin appeared in the house, she instantly recognized him as a decent man. He was modest, neatly dressed, but felt the absence of a woman's hand. Going into the kitchen, always notices small things that need a man's strength. Lifts, fetches, and screws what is needed. Mary has more than once caught herself that with pleasure looks at the thin face of a man and thinks, "If only I had once had such a husband." Then she remonstrated and scolded herself. "What are you thinking about, young ladies in waiting?" But her heart could not command, and again she tried to treat the man something especially tasty. All the more that her favorite Adam, next to Alvin, seemed to acquire a wolfish appetite, and that pleased her madly. She began to prepare larger portions so that she could wrap the rest and give it to Alvin to take with her. "It's a pity, Alvin. Take some food. Don't hesitate to have dinner in the evening. It's too much trouble to cook." He was embarrassed, even blushed a little, but he dared not refuse the treat and was especially courteous to her the next day, when he came with his pupil for the afternoon meal. Now Alvin accompanied Adam everywhere, and to the pool, where the boy had individual lessons, and to classes in the rehabilitation center, and for walks. They never bored each other and always found topics to discuss. Sometimes, when Alvin had the weekend off, Adam would call him and ask him to come over. Alvin thought that without an agreement with the landlady, he should not take too much initiative and was sly. "Adam, you're a man. You should realize that Thunder misses me," he said back, "and some household chores are piling up." "Why?" pulled Adam. "If I could come to you, I would help you and play with Thunder. He wouldn't be bored." And on his last day off, the boy asked him directly, "Alvin, can I come visit you?" "Sure, come if your mom lets you." Alvin breathed out a sigh of relief, and his mother did allow it. Moreover, she brought Adam herself, and she brought Mary with her. Alvin only grunted in embarrassment. Adam and his mother took a ride along the path. Then Clara decided to walk to the woods, and Mary began to clean the house. And as he did not persist, she, smiling, washed, rubbed and scrubbed and said, "It's been a long time since a woman's hands have been here. So Alvin, you let me clean up, and you entertain the guests." The bright winter sun was already beginning to warm up, so the adults were not afraid that Adam would catch cold. Thunder played with the boy with pleasure, forgetting about his old ailments. Adam's options were limited too, so the two were quite content in each other's company. As always, after fresh air, the boy ate boiled potatoes with appetite, dipping them in melted butter. Dinner was prepared this time by Alvin himself. He allowed himself to brag. "Well, the potatoes from our garden are good, eh? Crispy, aren't they? And my neighbor's butter, pure cow's butter, I save every year since autumn. Eat it. It's a natural product, not some synthetic one." Clara even squinted. It tasted so good. The day off had gone wonderfully. She said as she finished her dinner, "Thank you for your hospitality, Alvin. It's time for us to go, and Mary has finished cleaning up," said Clara. "Mom, it's so nice here. Can I stay at Alvin's for the night? I'll be gone and Thunder will miss you." The boy's eyes shone and his cheeks blushed. The mother saw how happy the child was in the company of the old man and Thunder. "Clara, let Adam stay. Tomorrow is Sunday. Alvin can come and get him. If you don't trust the old man, let Mary stay. There is enough room for everyone." Alvin supported the boy. Adam looked at his mother in such a belittling way that she hesitated. Here Mary also put in her weighty word. "If necessary, I'll stay here. Let the boy play in the fresh air, and all in the city, and in the city. And tomorrow night you'll send a car for us. What am I going to do with you?" "Stay, you insolent guests," laughed Clara. From that day on, Adam's overnight stays at his grandfather's house became quite frequent. Adam spent almost every weekend with Alvin. Sometimes Mary stayed overnight to prepare a good meal for the two men, but this happened very rarely because her main work required her presence in the big farmhouse. The old man and the boy were so strong that the two of them never got bored, and thunder did not let them get bored. Spring came, and one weekend, watching Alvin dismantle fishing gear, Adam became interested in unfamiliar objects. "What's this? What's this? And how does the feeder catch?" he asked Alvin. He patiently, even with pleasure, showed everything and told about the tricks of fishing. "Wow," the boy's eyes lit up, "and I have never been fishing." Alvin realized it was time. If in time to support interest, it will be Adam's gift for life, and if you lose this moment, so it will fly away, and the boy will not become a fisherman, never in his life. "Well, tomorrow then, without any solemnity," he said. "Let's go to bed, and tomorrow at 5 a.m. we'll meet the dawn at the river." Adam gasped. "Really? We'll get up and go. That'll be the truth. We're our own masters, aren't we?" Trying not to show his excitement, Alvin answered him. Yes, he was worried. The boy was not used to hardship, the damp morning, the chill, and the damp air. There was no telling if he would enjoy it all, but it was said done. Up at the right time, quickly packed and set off, Mary grumbling and putting on Adam a warm old Alvin jacket, kept shoving them a bag of food, then crossed discreetly to the boy his stroller. It was Adam's first fishing trip. You can't go far in a stroller, and it was decided to fish in the pond, about 500 meters from the road. The old man spoke in detail about how to fish properly, how to string worms, how to cast the rod. At morning dawn, beat good, Alvin began to drag one fish after another. Adam awkwardly slung the rod, long, uncomfortable, but here he was lucky, a bite. He froze, looking at the float, then looked at Alvin. He said silently, "Pull." The boy pulled the rod. A small, silvery fish flashed in the air. "Yay!" Alvin shouted in a whisper, and Adam immediately picked up the joke. Hooray! The joy of catching their first fish was greater than the new cell phone they'd bought for Christmas. The fishermen got into the excitement and didn't notice how time flew by. Soon there was a nice catch in the bucket. Alvin was pleasantly surprised that Adam did not show any weakness of spirit. He patiently chased away the mosquitoes that were so pesky as the air warmed. He didn't whine when the fishing hook got caught in his hair, and in general, he was a tough little man. That afternoon, Mary boiled the royal fish soup in her own special recipe, and the rest of the fish were roasted on the brazier, and the men went together to build the fire and clean the fish. Despite being tired and unaccustomed to hard work for him, Adam did not think of giving up. He also cooked fish on the fire for the first time in his life and was proud that he was really helping adults. He enjoyed looking at his hard-earned calluses and scratched, hooked fingers. He might not become a fishing enthusiast, but this joy would stay with him for the rest of his life. Alvin thought, and Mary, looking at the way her favorite flies to the soup, rejoiced, strengthened health and ruddy cheeks Adam. Summer days passed one after another. Adam got tanned and strong. Mary laughed. Before this summer, she had been racking her brains, inventing a particularly tasty dish for the boy, but here he ate everything and asked for more. A healthy body is a healthy spirit. The driver Alvin exclaimed, feeling how the boy was getting stronger. He had to lift both the child and the wheelchair to load them into the car, and he could tell exactly how much his ward weighed before his walks with his grandfather and how much he weighed now. Fall was approaching again. One Saturday evening, Mary and Adam also drove over to Alvin's house to take a break from the noise of the city and enjoy the last of the warm money together. Mary and Alvin, for a long time, have not hidden mutual sympathy, and the woman did not hesitate to come to patronize in his bachelor household to prepare dishes tastier. It was a quiet, peaceful evening. Nothing boded ill, but age sometimes gives out unexpected and unpleasant things. In the evening, Alvin suddenly felt sick, shortness of breath and dizziness. In order not to cause panic in Mary, already prone to excessive worry, he quietly called Adam. "Adam, I don't feel well. My blood pressure must be up. We won't make any noise, or we'll scare Mary. I'm going to take my medicine and lie down while you feed Thunder. I'll just lie down for a while, and then we'll go to dinner with you." Adam nodded understandingly and rolled the baby carriage to the dog kennel. He fed Thunder, scratched him behind the ear, and talked to his four-legged friend. It was time to go after Alvin. When the boy pulled into the old man's room, he saw Alvin lying on the bed, the man's eyes closed, one arm dangling to the floor. Adam was frightened. It seemed to him that the old man was not breathing. "Grandpa Alvin, don't die," shouted the boy. Without remembering himself, he jumped up sharply from the chair and took a few steps towards Alvin. But from the strain near the very bed, he fell to his knees. Alvin jumped up on the spot in horror. "Jesus, Adam, what happened?" He shrieked, scooping the boy up under his arms, lifting him off the floor. Adam, both crying and laughing. "I was frightened. I thought you were dead." "Well, Adam, don't cry. It's all right. Nothing's going to happen to me. It must have been the medicine, and I dozed off. And you? Did you come to me by yourself?" "I don't know. I guess I don't remember. I was really scared." Alvin sat on the floor, cradling the child, and could not understand anything. Was Adam so shaken by the fright that he was able to take independent steps? The man believed and disbelieved, but for now he was afraid to test his hunch. Adam sobbed one last time and looked up at him. "Grandpa Alvin, don't tell Mom I cried," he said embarrassedly. "Oh, come on, honey. Of course I won't. Did you cry?" "I didn't see any tears." Alvin pressed the child's blonde head to his breast and kissed the top of his head discreetly. He was touched to the core by the boy's anxiety. Meanwhile, a frightened Mary appeared in the doorway, having come running to Adam's shrieks from the far corner of the garden. "What on earth is going on here?" she exclaimed, poking her head through the doorway. "Is everyone alive? What's going to happen to us? We are strong men, almost heroes," answered Alvin with a smile. He pulled Adam away from him and offered, "Come on, let me lift you up, and we'll try to take a few steps. Don't be afraid, Adam. I'll hold you up." The old man lifted the boy off the floor and held him up until the boy had his legs spread firmly. Mary froze in tense anticipation, but remained patiently silent. "Well," quietly ordered Alvin, and Adam took the first step. Even though his grandfather held him with both hands, even if it was only one step, but he took it himself. Adam was covered with sweat, his face was flushed, his eyes were fixed on his feet, as if he was mesmerized by their movements. Alvin gently nudged him forward, and the boy took another step, then another, and now the old man slowly led him around the round table across the small room. After taking a few steps, Adam looked up at his grandfather with some crooked, tortured smile, as if not believing himself. Then hesitantly, with Alvin's encouragement, he took a couple steps toward the exit. Jesus Adam. Mary, who was standing in the doorway, embraced him with her arms and pressed him to her warm chest with all her heart. The woman cried and kissed the boy with wet lips, then took his head away from her, was immediately frightened that he was standing almost on the same level as her, on his own feet, and began to cry with joy again. Everyone was stunned, in a ghastly excitement, dropping something now and then, murmuring their worries. Mary set the table, and the men, silently digesting the excitement of the minutes past, smiled at their thoughts. Finally, the hot tea helped everyone to calm down and relax, and the three of them began to remember anew what had happened, trying to make everything look funny or amusing. Needless to say, the feelings of the three loved ones when they went to bed quite late in the small house, among the greenery of the garden. The boy, as might be expected, was tired after an unaccustomed walk. Even though it was only a dozen other steps, but for him it was equal to a space flight. Therefore, the hero fell asleep with a happy smile on his face. Alvin, as always, was worried about the future of Adam. Would the child be able to overcome his fear? Would he go with confidence and determination? Would this urge to walk turn out to be a remission? He tossed and turned for a long time, remembering his fear, then smiled when he saw Adam's frightened face again. At old age, you don't give a restful sleep. Well, and Mary, according to the eternal female habit, prayed fervently for her beloved Adam, asked the Lord for mercy, and secretly admired Alvin. If it weren't for him, none of this would have happened to Adam. It is he, Alvin, who helps the boy to find strength. And then she shamefully hid her face from herself in the pillow after Alvin suddenly snapped. In the morning everyone remembered yesterday's joy. Adam could not wait to start walking as soon as possible. Since the evening, the adults had warned him not to start walking on his own in the morning. Your leg muscles are still very weak. It's dangerous. You have to take it easy for the first few days, Alvin explained. Be sure to wait for me, just the two of us. Adam promised. He barely waited for breakfast to be over, even ate against his custom. Not as well as usual. Well, hurry up. Now. Alvin smiled at him. Thunder watched in amazement as his two masters, big and small, intertwined into one four-legged creature, passed by his kennel time after time. Adam had a hard time walking on the ground. The path seemed to curl up under his feet, as if on purpose, preventing him from walking. The boy was sweating and out of breath, but again and again Alvin spoke. Let's go. He practiced so persistently that after lunch he didn't even object when Mary laid him down in the shade on a wide bench. Happy, he fell asleep in the fresh air, only his cheeks flushed with a healthy blush, and the old men sat together, admiring the sleeping child and talking quietly about their own things. What happiness God had given them, how great it was to be not lonely in their old age, how good it was in the garden today. They didn't talk about everything, of course, but they kept silent about something secret. It was Sunday evening, and they waited anxiously for the arrival of Clara at the dacha. Finally, her black Jeep stopped near the gate of the cottage. When she opened the gate, the woman saw that the wheelchair was empty and standing orphaned, and Adam was walking carefully along the path leading to the house. He was being carefully supported by Alvin, and next to him was a huge Thunder, forgetting about his advanced years. Clara stood silent and cried, afraid to break their idyll. She even managed to hold back a cry of joy and waited until her son came to her. Then they had tea again, talked about yesterday's events, discussed every little thing that came to mind. Excited Adam dreamed how he would go fishing, then to the forest for mushrooms then. There was no end to his dreams. "Wait, Adam." Alvin slowed him down. "Remember what Helen said about the weakened wings of birds that don't fly for a long time in the hospital? So did you. Your legs have been immobile for too long, and now the main thing is not to hurt them. You and your mom will show yourselves to the doctors. They will tell you how to restore their strength, and then you and I will go anywhere." Finally, they began to get ready to go home. When the boy got into the car, Alvin said to Clara, "I guess you don't need me anymore." Adam, of course, must be urgently shown to the doctors, although I can tell you without doctors that everything will be fine. The old man became sad. He would not go to his pupil every morning now. Tears were ready to come to his eyes. Clara hugged him heartily. "Don't be silly, Alvin. How will we be without you? I have no words to express my gratitude to you. You not only became my son's grandfather, but you replaced the father I don't remember. You will always be a part of our family. Yes, you are like family to me too," the old man said, quietly wiping his eyes. He waved after the car for a long time and knew that tomorrow the young woman would call him and invite him to her place. Mary, holding Alvin by the arm, slowly walked along the leaf-strewn path to the house. Today they again visited the cemetery where Kathy, Alvin's wife, repented on the day of her death. Mary carefully tidied up the grave of a woman she had never known, but from her daughter Helen she judged that Kathy was a kind and sincere woman. Otherwise, how could Helen grow up to be so kind-hearted and hardworking? "It's just a pity that things didn't work out for my daughter with her family and children," Alvin always regretted, "and she was left alone with her beloved animals. You, Alvin, do not anger God." Mary consoled him. "What can you do? Not everyone is given such happiness as having children. So you see, I've lived my life like a barren flower. Yes, you are Mary, and now you are still quite blooming." The old man smiled and grabbed to hug his girlfriend. "Wow, barren flower, what would I do without you?" They became friends immediately, from the first days of their acquaintance, and then lived together to brighten up two lonely lives. At first, Mary stayed for the weekend. Then, as she grew older, she was replaced in the big house by Clara, a young assistant, and she finally moved to Alvin's house. The two of them were calm and joyful. They walked leisurely around the garden, trying to please the children with apples and ripe plums. The number of children, along with Helen, had long included Clara and Adam, who had grown into a tall, handsome man. All these years, Alvin's life went not just next to, but in close connection with his new family, Clara, Adam, and Mary. Clara more than once or twice invited him to move into her house. She even offered to build a small outbuilding in the same yard so that he wouldn't have to travel back and forth, but the old man held independent views in everything. Moreover, now he was not alone. Luckily for him, he met Mary, who doted on two men, Adam and her Alvin, as she always called him. Helen was incredibly glad that her father was not alone. She quickly became friends with Aunt Mary, as she began to call his new, although not young, wife. The old people didn't sign. Why such tenderness? It is not their business to attract unnecessary human attention to themselves. It is enough for them to live nearby quietly, so that there is a companion on a cloudy day, a sunny morning, or a sleepless night. With the groans of an old man, there is no escape. Helen came to see them quite rarely now because she was addicted to tourist trips around the country. The old people's house was filled with magnets, souvenirs, all kinds of embroidery and rugs from different parts of the world. Adam has grown up over the years, graduated from school and college. No one would have imagined that the handsome young man, who was once disabled and spent several years of his childhood confined to a wheelchair. At the beginning of his career, he completed an internship at Clara. Mom wanted her son to have his first experience under her supervision. However, after receiving his diploma, the son decided not to work with her. "No, Mom, no," he stated firmly. "I don't want to be a mama's boy. That's the first thing. You will understand me here, right?" Mother could not resist his disarming smile. "Well, suppose I understand, but I wouldn't control you so much." She objected weakly, clearly realizing that in fact, she could not help but interfere with her son's work. And what Mother could? "And the second reason is, I'm not interested in your industry, Mom. You know, I have always dreamed of internet technologies. What should I do now?" "Forget about your dream?" Clara, of course, agreed. She remembered herself very well in her youth. She never knew how to obey someone else's will. She did everything in defiance of everything. If only he could achieve his goal. Maybe this is the secret of her success. Well, she won't cross her boy's path. Let him build his life the way he likes. He is an adult, independent man. Adam really wanted to achieve everything himself, as Alvin once taught him. Not believing in God or the devil, Clara only gasped and mentally spat to the side so as not to jinx it when faced with his stubbornness, bordering on stubbornness. Her weak boy, who once suffered from 2 strong experiences, imperceptibly grew stronger physically and spiritually, and all thanks to the fact that he received life lessons in time from an old, unremarkable, in general, man, grandfather Alvin. Clara thanked fate for receiving some kind of magical hint that summer. Her son needs a friend, a mature man, an experienced and decent person. So people who were completely strangers to each other became close and became, in fact, one family. Adam, having left his hometown, did not abandon his grandfather Alvin. He made sure to deliver him a good computer. And now Alvin was a user, better than some of the young people, and he and his mother also organized a good renovation in the country house where 2 of their relatives now lived. And the life of Mary and Alvin became completely comfortable. Clara also met her fate at an exhibition of young artists and got married. "Hello!" It came from behind the gate. "Do you accept guests?" "Oh, Clara!" Alvin was happy. "Mary, put on the kettle." Clara and Ethan arrived. "We came to you for a reason," said joyful Clara. "We brought you invitations, so Adam's wedding is coming soon." And she handed Alvin an envelope decorated with 2 doves. Behind her, the silent bumpkin Ethan smiled, who, smiling so silently, made friends with the inhabitants of the country house and the young shepherd Rada, who was sheltered after the death of Thunder. It turned out that Adam met a good girl and proposed to her, and now joyful chores lay ahead, preparing gifts, dressing for the wedding. "Well?" Clara said, finishing off the delicious tea from Alvin with his signature dried herbs. "Tomorrow we will pick you up at this time. You need to buy beautiful outfits." "What about us old people?" Both protested. Clara stopped them with one wave of her hand. "Come on. Our Adam must have the most beautiful relatives. Do you agree? It's a shame. What will the bride's relatives think?" The old people sighed. Yes, it was not worth disgracing the boy. Alvin and Mary were among the most honored guests. "Meet these 2 people who are dearest to me." Adam introduced them to his bride and matchmakers. "My grandfather Alvin. I owe my character, strength, and health to him. And this is Mary, my nurse and water maid, well, almost a nanny. And now she's also a grandmother, since she's my grandfather's wife. I'll tell you a lot of good things about them." Alvin and Mary were embarrassed, furtively looking at the beautiful bride and their pet Adam, but soon got used to it and completely devoted themselves to the holiday. The guests had fun, said toasts, as usual, wishing the newlyweds eternal love, family happiness, and many children. Mary, as usual, cried with joy in such cases, and Alvin only grunted with displeasure, wiping an unsolicited tear from his eyes.
Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana sat at home waiting for her mother and father to come home from work. They worked at the poultry farm as laborers. Adriana had already heated her parents' dinner and looked out of her relative's window. Soon the 17-year-old girl saw her mother, followed by her father. Adriana smiled and ran to open the front door. As soon as her parents walked in, Adriana said she wanted to talk to them over dinner. The head of the family looked at her daughter with a stern look and asked, "I hope the conversation is not about your pregnancy." "Daddy, again you have failed to make a joke." A little irritated, said the daughter, who already knew her father's gaze and always distinguished when the gaze is angry. And when deliberately angry in such a situation, the man was not angry. The head of the family on the daughter's answer laughed and said, "You know me and my mother is peeled. Okay, let's set the table and talk over dinner." Soon the family was sitting in the kitchen and talking peacefully. When dinner was about to end, the girl's father asked his daughter what exactly she wanted to say. Adriana hesitated a bit and said that she had changed her mind about going to medical school and wanted to become an interior designer. When the father heard this, he was amazed, because his daughter had been dreaming about medicine since she was 16 years old. And then, when it is already necessary to go to enroll, she changes her mind. And he asked, "Why you choose this particular direction in our village in this specialty? You obviously do not get a job." "I know that, but maybe I'll be lucky enough to make my personal life in the city. And to be honest, I don't really want to go back to the village where there's no future. You're the one who started dreaming about a prince on a white horse, but you are not yet 18 to think about it," said the girl's mother. "Mom, Dad, but I'll be 18 on September 1st. And I'm not saying that I'm going to the city to arrange my personal life right now. Right now, I want to major in design." Parents. The girls looked at each other, and the head of the family did not object to his daughter's choice. He told his wife that Adriana has the right to decide what she wants to be in the future. Adriana's mother looked at her child, then hugged her and asked her to keep her head in the city. The girl gratefully hugged each parent in turn. Soon, Adriana left for the city where she enrolled in college to study design. The girl was given a dormitory as a non-resident. She immediately made friends with her roommate, and soon Adriana began her studies. In college, Adriana especially became friends with fellow student Betty, who lived in this city with her parents. Adriana liked this girl with her carefree character. Time moved imperceptibly, and now the winter vacation was approaching. A week before Adriana's departure to the village, Betty suggested to her to go and sit in a cafe. Adriana supported her friend's idea, as she didn't often visit such places due to lack of money. Her parents sent her some money, but they quickly ran out. Soon the students were sitting in a cafe and discussing how they would celebrate the new year. Betty said that she would go to a nightclub where she would have a good time. Adriana said sadly that she did not have such an opportunity because they had not yet built such entertainment places in the village. Betty looked at her in amazement and then asked, "How do you have fun there? Young people usually go to the club on weekends for discos." "Well, it sucks. I don't envy the villagers," Betty said with a laugh. The girls continued to talk to each other as two young men approached them and offered them company. Betty looked at the boys. Then she looked at Adriana as if to ask if she would be willing to be introduced. Adriana nodded and let her friend know she was okay with it. And in just a few minutes, the guys had already joined the girls. One of the young men was called Konstantin, and the other Stephen. Adriana immediately took notice of Stephen, and the whole evening was sneaking glances at him. Adriana also noticed that her friend liked this guy. Some more time passed, and Adriana told the company that it was time for her to go to the dormitory. The young men sighed disappointedly, and Konstantin said that he and his friend had hoped to go for a longer walk. Adriana responded by suggesting that they should meet tomorrow and just walk outside. Stephen, having heard the suggestion, took up the idea, and then he drove Adriana to the dormitory and then Betty home in his car. Adriana was already lying down to rest, thinking about her new acquaintance, when she received a call on her cell phone from a friend. Betty excitedly described how she had a long conversation with Stephen when saying goodbye. Adriana unknowingly felt jealous of the boyfriend, and suddenly she said, "Classmates, why are you telling me this now? I want to bring it to your attention that I like Stephen, and I saw you looking at him in the cafe. So I'm going to ask you to turn your attention to his friend. Don't tell me what to do. And you're right to point out that I was looking at him because I liked him too. Now I will bring it to your attention that Stephen is an adult, and it's up to him to decide who he wants to spend his time with," Adriana said sharply, and immediately disconnected the connection. The next day, the girls met at the college. They felt that a cat had run between them and did not communicate especially strongly. And in the evening of the same day, when the girls met with their boyfriends, the young men noticed that the girls tried not to communicate with each other. Stephen at first tried to defuse the situation, and then asked what fly had bitten you both. "Yesterday was so much fun, and today it's like a day of mourning. Why don't we break into pairs? I want to go out with Adriana." And after the last sentence, he turned to Adriana and asked, "Do you mind?" "Of course not." With a smile, the girl answered, and looked triumphantly at her friend, who smirked wryly and said quietly, "But it's on. Go for a walk." Adriana got into the car to Stephen, and they went for a drive around the evening city. In the car, the young man asked the girl to tell about herself. She complied with his request, and then the man asked what had happened between the girls. Adriana, "Shit," she said to herself as she did not know what to answer. In the meantime, Stephen looked questioningly at Daddy, said a little fight they had. Asking what for? Since I won't tell you anyway. Okay, I won't ask. And anyway, you found out all about me. Why I don't know your background yet. The young man laughed and said that he kept more about himself on purpose so that there was a reason to meet again. The young woman liked his answer, but insisted that he tell her about himself. From the narrative, Stephen Adriana learned that he is 27 years old, works in a bank. He lives with his mother, but is going to buy a 2-room apartment within a month. About his father, the guy said that his father died last year, and also the young man said that he was married. The marriage lasted only a year. The girl, having heard that Stephen was divorced, asked why he separated from his wife. The interlocutor, after a little thought, replied, "There is a reason that is most often used by people who want to divorce. It is called so. They did not match their characters. I hope that your curiosity satisfied." After a while, the girl said she had to go to the hostel. The man drove Adriana home, and when she was about to get out of the car, he pulled her to him and wanted to kiss her. Adriana pushed the new acquaintance away from her and asked indignantly what he was doing. Stephen looked at the girl perplexed and simply replied that he wanted to kiss the now Adriana. She looked at the young man in amazement and mumbled, "Is it customary for you to kiss a girl on the lips on the second day of acquaintance? What's wrong with that? But we hardly know each other to kiss already," she said quietly. "If you don't want to, I won't. Okay, let's say goodbye. I gotta go too. We'll see each other again, of course, but only after a while, because I have to go on a business trip. I'm going to my parents' house in a few days too. You will call me for sure." Soon, Adriana went to her parents' house in the countryside. She stayed there for the winter vacation. During this time, the guy called her on New Year's Eve, and one more time. The girl was worried that her relationship with Stephen might not work out. She had already realized that she had fallen in love with this man with all her heart. Soon, Adriana arrived for her studies. At college, she met up with a friend she hadn't spoken to since Stephen had suggested a walk through the pears. Adriana thought that their conflict with her friend had already passed during the winter break. So without a second thought, she approached Betty and asked how the girl had celebrated New Year's Eve. Betty arrogantly glanced at her classmate and said, "Why are you wondering? My time about driving. Although I can tell you that I've had a good time these days. I went out with Stephen a couple times. He should be here tomorrow. By the way, what do you mean you met him?" Adriana asked in bewilderment. "You've gone to the country. So he suggested that we spend some leisure time together. And I didn't refuse." Adriana walked away from Betty in silence. She felt a wave of hatred rising in her soul towards her friend, but not towards the young man. Adriana blamed Betty for everything. She believed that it was her classmate who initiated these meetings. After studying, Adriana hurried to the dormitory. She couldn't wait to call her lover, and as soon as she found herself in the room, she immediately dialed Stephen. And when she heard his voice, she asked when he was coming. The guy was surprised at the girl's call and answered that in 2 days, and Adriana asked the question that worried her the most. "Tell me, why did you go out with me? You like Betty, don't you? You're strange, but I liked you. That's why we went out. Let me come over and we'll talk about it." Soon Stephen arrived in town and he met the girl. He looked at Adriana, who had her head down, looking at her hand. The man asked the girl why she had called earlier with this topic of conversation. Adriana kept silent as she did not want to admit to the guy that she was in love with him. And when Stephen pulled the girl to himself and kissed her passionately on the lips, she did not pull away, because at that moment she realized that if she pushed the men away now, Stephen would just leave and never come back. The guy kissed Adriana for a long time, and then the couple went for a drive around the city. After this meeting, a month passed. During this time, Stephen had already bought an apartment and occasionally met Adriana. The girl was angry that the guy came to her so rarely, and he told her in response that he had an emergency at work and had to stay at the bank a lot. Adriana practically did not communicate with her friend. Betty was calm about it and only occasionally made tricky jokes. That Adriana only needed Stephen for a while. Adriana tried not to react to her former friend's words. But one day, when she again heard a rejoinder in her address from Betty, she could not stand it and replied, "You are all angry that the word did not choose you, but that's not my fault. He made his own choice. Why don't you stop bugging me with your sarcastic remarks? You're silly. Pretty soon you'll be crying that you crossed me. Are you saying you'll still claim my boyfriend knowing I'm dating him? You got that right. And if I have to, I'm not going to play hard to get and jump into bed with him," Betty said with a smirk, and immediately went on her way. Adriana stood in a stupor. From this conversation, the girl suddenly realized that Stephen was talking to Betty, since how could the former friend know that she was denying Stephen intimacy? And at the same moment, Adriana decided that she would call her boyfriend right away and offer him to spend the night together. The girl, not thinking long, dialed the guy and said that she wanted to spend the weekend with a sleepover at his place. The man was stunned by this news and instantly agreed. Soon Adriana was making love to Stephen for the first time, and for the morning. When she woke up, she did not regret her decision. She wanted now every morning to wake up in the arms of her favorite man and hear from him pleasant compliments. After that night, the man came to the girl's dormitory more often and took her to his place for sleepovers. Adriana already thought that soon they would become husband and wife, and so she told her lover, "We have been dating for almost 3 months. Maybe we should think about getting married. I don't really need a stamp in my passport. We're good together, and that's what matters. You know, I have a question for you too. Tell me, what are you ready to do for love for me?" The young woman thought for a moment, and then in all seriousness answered that she was ready to sacrifice everything, but only to be near him. In response to this confession, the guy smiled and said that nothing had to be sacrificed, and immediately hugging the girl said, "I just want you to make a tattoo on your shoulder, descending roses. It really turns me on in bed, but it's up to you to decide if you want to do it or not. And if you agree to it, I'll draw the sketch of the flower myself. I'll do it. In the meantime, you draw the flower." The next day, The girl found out how much the procedure cost, and after that she called her mother to ask her for money. Adriana did not hide from her mother what she was asking for, and honestly said that she wanted to get a tattoo. Her mother responded by saying that it was stupid to disfigure her body with Adriana's pictures. When she heard the refusal, she continued to me, "It is very important to do it the way a loved one asked for it. You got a boyfriend, and you never even mentioned him once on the phone. How did you start living in the city? Did you become secretive? I'm sorry, but I wasn't ready to tell you about my relationship with this man. Now I'm sure of our feelings for each other. I'll tell you all about Stephen. But now you tell me, will you give me the money or not?" The mother said yes to her daughter. And on the same day, Adriana received a transfer from her parents. After a while, the girl visited a salon and made a tattoo on her right shoulder. She proudly showed the picture on her body to her lover. Stephen enthusiastically appreciated the tattoo and told the girl the cherished words that Adriana was dear to him. A month flew by when Adriana, having got up in the morning, felt indisposed. The girl felt nauseous and had a general feeling of weakness. Adriana barely sat through her classes that day, hurrying to the dormitory to lie down. She hoped that she would feel better the next day. However, it didn't happen. Adriana felt an uneasy feeling in her soul, and then it hit her. What if she was pregnant? After her college class, Adriana stopped by the drugstore and bought a test. When she got to her dorm, she went straight to the restroom where she did the procedure as instructed. And then the girl watched with excitement as 2 blue stripes appeared on the litmus paper. Adriana was unspeakably happy about it. After all, now she was carrying a baby from her favorite person under her heart. And this meant that soon Adriana will become the legal spouse of the chosen one. The young woman immediately called her lover and said that she wanted to see him immediately. The man promised the girl that as soon as he was free, he would come. Adriana waited with excitement for the chosen one to tell the glad tidings, and as soon as she saw Stephen, immediately hugged him and in his ear whispered the news about the baby. The man pulled away from the embrace and looked at the girl unhappily. Then he asked what Adriana was going to do about it. The young woman looked at the boy perplexed and said firmly that she was going to give birth. Stephen was a little down after the words of the girl, which did not escape Adriana's attention. And she asked him a question. "Are you not happy about it?" "I don't know how to answer that. It's just that the news was unexpected, and I wasn't ready to hear it. Since you decided to have a baby, we probably need to legalize the relationship so that the baby is born in a complete family, where there is a mom and dad. These are exactly the words I've been waiting to hear from you when you need to introduce me to your mom. And then I'm gonna call my parents and invite them over, and they're gonna rent an apartment here for a couple days. You and I need to get married as soon as possible, before I get a belly." Soon Stephen introduced Adriana to his mother Kathy. Adriana tried to be friendly with her future relative, but she intuitively sensed that the woman didn't like her. Adriana thought to herself that Adriana's mother was probably just not ready for her son to remarry and was therefore a little belligerent toward her. Meanwhile, Kathy began to ask the young couple when they were going to get married. Stephen replied that initially they would wait for Adriana's parents and then they would apply at once. The landlady nodded in response and immediately said, "Son, I won't discourage you from taking this step, but I think you're rushing the wedding. You don't know each other well enough to be a family. But if you've made this decision, I insist that there be no wedding. I just want you to get married without the formal part. Your father and I already spent a lot of money on your first wedding. I wasn't planning on having a big party. I was just going to get married and sit with my relatives in a cafe. And we're in a hurry to apply to the registry office for one reason only. Adriana is expecting a baby. You have a rare young person, as I see," Stephen's mother said coldly and looked at her future daughter-in-law with a piercing look. As soon as Adriana and her chosen one went outside from Kathy, the young woman told the man with annoyance that she would like to have a wedding, not a party. The young woman added that she was getting married for the first time and would like to be in a white dress on that day. Stephen replied that it was only a waste of finances to play a wedding now. The young woman tried to object to the young man, but he interrupted her and said, "You know very well that I have recently purchased real estate. I had savings, but not enough to buy an apartment, so I had to take out a loan from the bank. Now you think about it. How much money are we going to use for the party? Or maybe your parents will give us money to throw a wedding. No, they can't help us because they don't make much money. Then we'll never speak of it again." Soon Adriana called her parents and invited them to come to meet her fiancé. Only the girl's mother came. The woman blessed her daughter and promised that she and her father would already come to the marriage ceremony. Adriana was happy that now her mother is familiar with her favorite person. After a while, the young people filed an application in the registry office. Then the newlyweds celebrated the marriage ceremony in one cozy cafe, where only the closest relatives were present. After Adriana became the legal spouse of Stephen, then she moved to live in her husband's apartment. Time slowly went on. The first half of the pregnancy, the young woman felt good. But when the second trimester began, then the doctor said that she needed to lie in the hospital for preservation. And as a result, Adriana was often in the hospital almost until the birth. The young woman gave birth prematurely, a baby girl, which she and her husband named Christina. While in the hospital, Adriana learned that her daughter had kidney disease. The young woman was very worried about this and asked Our Lady only for the health of her little girl. In connection with the girl's illness, Adriana stayed in the hospital for a long time, and after discharge, the attending doctor immediately said that now it was necessary to carefully monitor her daughter's condition and to act precisely according to the instructions of the medical staff. The young woman, as soon as she found herself at home, realized that she was not ready to cope with maternal duties alone. Adriana approached her husband and asked him to talk to her mom about staying with them for a while. Stephen, after listening to the request, responded by telling Adriana to call on her own. She was offended by her husband's words and told him, "You must be forgetting that Christina is your daughter. You see that the baby cries a lot. And I, because I became a mom for the first time, do not know how to act in this or that situation. You yourself wanted this baby, so you should be ready for all the surprises. There are internet forums and literature. Here, sit and learn how to babysit a baby. And after all, you have your own mother to turn to. But my mom works, and your mom is retired. Okay, I'll talk to my mother-in-law myself." Hiding irritation, said the girl. And in a few minutes, Adriana dialed Kathy's number. As soon as she picked up the phone, the daughter-in-law asked her to come to visit. The pensioner asked what was the purpose. Adriana almost responded by cursing her mother-in-law, but then she pulled herself together and politely said, "Just to check on your granddaughter. And in fact, I would like with you in confidence you can come tomorrow." "I will try," said the interlocutor, and immediately disconnected the connection. Adriana waited all the next day, but her mother-in-law didn't show up. Kathy came only 2 days later. She entered the apartment and glanced at her granddaughter and asked her what her daughter-in-law wanted from her. Adriana did not go around. Yes, she told her that she needed help. She explained that she could not cope with the duck, as the child only in her arms behaves calmly, and she has to do laundry, ironing, and cooking at home. Adriana asked her mother-in-law to come to them at least 3 times a week for 3 hours. Kathy didn't say a word. She listened and then said thoughtfully that she never thought her son would marry a country bumpkin who couldn't be a mother and a good housewife. Adriana felt anger boiling up inside her after her mother-in-law's words. But mentally she forced herself to calm down and said aloud, "I realize you don't like me, but your son made a choice and fell in love with me. And we live together. Soulmate. And I brought you here to ask for help, not to discuss me. Stephen and I are raising your granddaughter. You know, your granddaughter, not some stranger's girl. And that's the only reason I'm asking for your help. I don't need to make any pretty speeches right now. I'm a mother too, and I raised my son without any help from my family. I think you are just lazy as you don't have time to do everything when the baby is sleeping. Your son was not born sick like Stephen and I were, and you didn't have to give medications on a strict schedule. That's one thing. And secondly, our daughter sleeps restlessly if she lies in the crib any rustle, and the baby wakes up. And Christina sleeps serenely only when she is in my arms. And so I just do not have enough time for household chores, as I am always with my daughter in my arms. You don't have to beg me with tears. I can come over twice a week for a couple hours. Now I have to go. Adriana saw her mother-in-law off and breathed a sigh of relief. She was even glad that the old woman would come twice a week. And as soon as her husband arrived, Adriana informed him that she had spoken to his mother and they had agreed. Stephen nodded in agreement. It had been a month since Kathy had visited Adriana. And then the elderly woman told her sister-in-law that she was leaving for the sanatorium, so she would not come the day after tomorrow. Adriana looked at her mother-in-law in astonishment and was surprised, as there had been no talk about the sanatorium before. Adriana decided not to focus on it and tried to distract herself from these thoughts. A few days passed, and Adriana went out for a walk with her daughter. She wanted a stroller and quietly rode her daughter. As suddenly Stop Digging, the young woman saw her mother-in-law, who was getting out of her car. Kathy did not see her daughter-in-law. She was in a hurry to go to a fashion boutique. Meanwhile, Adriana could not get away from the fact that she had just seen a relative who was supposed to be in a sanatorium. Adriana came home after the walk in a bad mood. She wanted to tell her husband that her mother was a two-faced person, but she could not say anything because her daughter suddenly began to cry. And when Adriana touched the baby's forehead, she realized that the child had a fever. The woman called an ambulance, and she and Christina were hospitalized. As it turned out, subsequently the girl's kidneys made themselves known. Adriana spent a long time with her daughter in the hospital. After discharge, expensive medications were required. The man was angry that so much money was spent on pills and injections. Adriana saw that all this unnerved her loved one and calmed him as much as she could, saying that Christina would soon get better. However, 6 months later, the girl became ill again, and once again Adriana and her daughter went to the hospital. Stephen this time very rarely visited his wife and child. He told his wife that he had a lot of work at the bank. Adriana only sighed bitterly in response. After a while, the young woman and her daughter were discharged. The doctor immediately informed Adriana that surgery would likely be required if a recurrence occurred. Adriana replied that if it had to be done, she and her husband were ready. Time moved on, and Christina had already turned 1.5 years old, and the young woman already thought that the girl's disease had receded forever. But her expectations were not justified, as her daughter became ill again. And here is another hospitalization. This time Adriana already knew that there would be an operation and was ready for it. Soon the girl was operated. The doctor immediately informed the mother that now it will be necessary to go through a long rehabilitation period. The medic, after the discharge of the child, gave the woman a full list of instructions, how the daughter should be cared for. Adriana with Christina returned home. The girl was glad that now the hospital walls are behind her. She really hoped that her daughter would recover completely. And when she and Christina were taken from the hospital by her husband, she said so. Stephen only gave her husband a sullen look after these words. Life went on from there. Adriana tried to be a model wife and always welcomed her husband home from work. However, Adriana began to notice that lately her husband was often late at the bank, and it was also suspicious that Stephen, who was not a fan of nightclubs, suddenly became a regular. The woman tried to talk to her husband on the subject, but he replied, as soon as the conversation on the subject came up, that this way he relieves stress. After work, and lately Adriana has noticed another oddity in the behavior of her spouse. When her husband gets a phone call, he often goes out to talk on the stairwell. Woman, it seems suspicious. And when once again Stephen called and he went out, she quietly followed her chosen one. Adriana looked through the peephole and saw that her lover was standing with his back to her and talking to someone. Adriana opened the door a little and listened. Immediately, she heard her husband saying, "Shalva is not mine. I miss you too." As soon as Adriana heard this phrase, she was like an electric shock. She jerked the door open and looked angrily at her spouse. The man turned around and immediately assessed the situation. Stephen asked his spouse to come into the apartment and not to make a fight here. Adriana forced herself to do it, and as soon as her husband followed her into the hallway, she turned to him and wanted to slap him. But Stephen managed to intercept her hand, saying, "You're behaving like a countrywoman. Didn't you realize earlier that I had a woman on the side? We're civilized people and have a right to privacy. Are you saying that I can have a lover and go to him and have a good night out? You can't, as you're the one who has to keep the family home safe. And I, for your information, am the only one who brings money into our budget. And you're giving me a hard time about it. As soon as Christina turns 3, I'm going to go to work. It's only a couple months away. Don't talk nonsense. Where are you going to work if you haven't finished college? How about selling vegetables at the market? I won't let that happen. I don't need someone pointing a finger at me and telling me that a respectable banker's wife is a slave trader. I don't understand you, but you accused me of cheating. What's the big deal? I was expecting you to have the city permit. I support you and your daughter. I don't have to take your pathetic allowance into account because it's only enough for your medication. I don't beat you like other husbands do and keep you up all night. What else do you want? But you have a mistress. And for your information, I don't want to share you with any woman. If you don't hear me now, I will." With tears shouted the young woman and rushed to the kitchen, and after a few minutes returned back, presenting a knife to her wrist. Adriana did not say anything at that moment, but only looked at her husband, who realized from the look on his wife's face that she would do what she had planned. Stephen smiled gently at his wife and asked her to put down the cold weapon. And then the head of the family said that at this time they had overreacted. It is necessary to calm down and talk. The man, after these words, approached his wife and took the knife from her hands. Then he hugged her bare shoulder and gently kissed her where the tattoo was. The woman cried and snuggled into her husband's chest. Stephen stroked his wife's hair and asked her to stop shedding tears. Suddenly, the landlord lifted the face of the chosen one and said that he had an idea. Adriana, with tears in her eyes, she asked, "What do you want to propose?" "You should go to the village to your parents. You and Christina at least a little air and not be gassed by the air. It would do our daughter good. Especially you said yourself that soon we'll register for kindergarten, and she needs to gain strength before that. And where to do that? Not in the country. I'll think of something about your labor activity." Adriana listened to her husband's proposal in suspense and then exclaimed with indignation that Stephen had chosen her on purpose. She lived in the village so that she could have fun with other women. As if the man was ready for these words, so he hugged his wife again and gently in her ear said, "Do not talk nonsense. I'll even stay with you in the village for a few days. You and I are radically changing our lives for the better. I will not have any more trips to the side." "Did you mean it just now?" "Of course I mean it. Go ahead, call your mother and tell her you're coming soon. I'll take a few days off work tomorrow." Soon Adriana and her husband and daughter were in the village. Stephen stayed with his mother-in-law for 3 days and then returned to the city. When leaving, the man told his spouse that he would call every day. Adriana anxiously accompanied her beloved home. She was afraid that he would start seeing his mistress again. However, Stephen, as promised, called his wife every day and asked how she and her daughter spent their time. A month and a half had passed since Adriana had been living in the village with her daughter. The young woman missed her husband very much. And so, when he called and said that he was going home, Stephen did not particularly welcome his wife's decision, said that it would be possible to stay in the village longer. But Adriana refused and resolutely said, "If you do not come for us, in 2 days we will go ourselves with Christina. No need, I will take you." replied the head of the family. 2 months had passed since Adriana had returned with her daughter from the village. During this time, they celebrated her birthday. Christina enrolled the girl in kindergarten. Stephen continued to work at the bank, and Adriana took care of household chores. Soon the young woman was bored with everyday life, and she turned to her husband. "You promised me a job. Isn't it time to do it? Is it bad for you to stay at home? I'm bored. I feel like a dependent." "Okay, I'll look into it one of these days." Adriana, after her husband's answer, hugged him and rejoiced in her heart. The woman piously believed that now there was a white streak in their family, and there would be no more sorrow. However, she was mistaken, because 2 weeks after this conversation, her daughter fell ill, and the girl was taken straight from kindergarten to the hospital. Christina's right kidney, Adriana, fell ill. After learning all the details from the doctor, she couldn't believe that her girl was back in the hospital bed. The woman questioned the doctor. How is this possible? After all, Christina had undergone surgery on this organ. The doctor answered the girl's mother using medical terms, and Adriana understood almost nothing from the words of the doctor. The woman was worried about her daughter's condition, and it was doubly hard for her when she visited Christina and the girl asked not to leave her alone. Adriana tried to explain to the child that the doctor wanted to help her, but could do it only in the hospital. The daughter, though, listened to her mother's words, but still asked her mother to stay with her again. The young woman realized that it was simply impossible to explain to her 3-year-old daughter to stay in the hospital. And once again, when Adriana came to visit Christina, the girl whimpered and began to ask to go home. The young woman, as before, began to soothe the child. She herself could hardly hold back her tears. This dialogue was observed by the post nurse, who approached Adriana and said, "I understand you very well, how hard it is for you. I can only help in one way. When there will be my night shift, I will allow you to sleep with the girl in the room. I'll warn you that you'll have to sleep on a chair or a couch. But I'll do chairs in the hallway or even on the floor. How much do I owe you for this?" The nurse did not answer, but only smiled. Adriana immediately went to her daughter and told her that she would spend the night with her, but not every day. The little girl clapped her hands joyfully, and the mother at that moment thought how little a child needs for joy. Adriana. Now once every 4 days she slept over at her daughter's house. All other days the young woman was also at the hospital with Christina during the day. Adriana gave herself completely to caring for the girl. What was the use of a spouse who had taken a mistress? The woman found out about it by accident. It happened as follows. Adriana, as always, went to a sleepover with her daughter. But it turned out that the nurse was sick and was replaced by another nurse. Adriana tried to persuade the girl in the white coat to let her stay with Christina until morning. But the nurse replied that she had no right to do so and did not want to be reprimanded for making such a decision arbitrarily. Adriana had nothing left to do but to go home. The young woman quietly opened the door to the apartment and heard a woman's laughter. Adriana stopped like a halt. She listened and immediately recognized the guest's voice. It was her former college friend, who said it would be nice to be with you all the time and enjoy making love. "But that's what we do with you," in an excited voice, Stephen replied. Adriana didn't wait for Betty's reply and flashed into the living room where the couple was. Sitting on the couch in an embrace, Adriana threw herself at her rival, intending to claw at her hair. She was not allowed to do this. Spouse, who instantly oriented the man, hugged his beloved, and asked him to calm down. The young woman tried to break free, screaming that she was about to be torn to shreds by this mistress. Then Stephen commanded Betty, "Pack up and leave. We'll take care of this ourselves." The guest, smiling wryly, got up from the couch and sent a kiss to her former friend and went into the hallway. A few minutes later, the couple only heard the front door slam. Only after that, Stephen let go of his wife, who looked at him angrily. Adriana only wanted to shout hurtful phrases to her husband, but he beat her to it. "Pull yourself together. What did you want? You're always ending up in hospitals. You don't care about me. And I too, need care and a woman's affection. That's what I found with Betty. So while I take care of my sick daughter and have fun, so like she's begging you for expensive medication, and you can afford champagne, which costs a lot of money. How am I supposed to understand you? I give all of myself only to you and my daughter, and you're saving me such a pig. I'm asking you, let's not use big words and mutual insults. It's just that I've already explained to you that I lacked female attention. Now I'll give you a woman's attention in hysterics, said the young woman and rushed to the window, which opened wide. Adriana quickly climbed on the windowsill and fervently said, "If you lack attention, you will have it. I'm about to step off the 3rd floor and you'll be alone with your daughter. That's when you will have attention, because Christina will stay with you and you will have to take care of her. And if you fulfill your fatherly duties well, our daughter will provide you with care in your old age. Then you'll have a woman's attention in your old age. Think of your daughter. Why do you only care about yourself?" The man said, and made a step towards his wife. And at the same moment he heard the exasperated voice of his wife. "Stay away. We need to clarify the relationship once and for all. You have to promise to stop going to women. You know very well that I can do this deed at this moment." The man saw that his wife was in a hysterical state, and Stephen decided that now was not the best occasion to clarify the relationship. So he constantly apologized to his beloved and got down on one knee in front of Adriana, quietly saying, "Come down. I only now realized how much we love each other, and also realized that how much grief I'd brought you in this life. I'm sorry." Adriana looked incredulously at her lover, who continued to speak beautiful words. The young woman distrustfully stretched out her hands to him, and the man hurriedly removed his wife from the windowsill. He promised that he would have no more liaisons with women on the side. Adriana, hearing Stephen give her his word, immediately cried out, "And you already promised me that. What happened in the end? I find you alone with Betty. I told you it wouldn't happen again. Let's talk about your daughter. Tell me how she's doing." As soon as they talked about the girl, Adriana forgot about what had happened here the other day. The young woman told her that she had not been able to stay with her daughter for the night, and immediately told her that there was good news. Adriana said that Christina would be discharged in 2 days. The man, after his wife's words, hugged her and noted that the latest news is joyful. Soon the girl was discharged. Adriana put her daughter back in daycare and reminded her husband about the conversation about work. A few days passed after Christina was discharged, and Adriana noticed that her spouse was now dropping calls when called, and after a while would lock himself in the bathroom with the phone. Adriana had a woman's intuition that her husband was doing this for a reason. He clearly continues to communicate with Betty even though he doesn't see her, as the chosen one was on time from work. Adriana realized that there was no point in talking to her husband about his communication with his ex-girlfriend, and the girl decided that it was worth talking to her mother-in-law about it. Adriana took her daughter to kindergarten in the morning and immediately went to Stephen's mother. Kathy met her daughter-in-law warily, as the daughter-in-law rarely showed up unannounced. The landlady invited her into the hall and asked what had brought Adriana to visit. The young woman did not go around and around, but said straight away, "Your son is cheating on me. I'd like you to influence Stephen. I've spoken to him several times, but our conversation is going nowhere. Stephen keeps looking at other women. I wonder about that in particular." With a chuckle, Kathy said, and immediately continued, "If my son is not satisfied, how can I influence him? I see only one way out. You need to divorce, and the whole problem will be solved." "What do you mean, divorce? Stephen and I have a child together. Besides, my daughter's not in good health. And on top of all that, I love my husband. Stephen is now in a relationship with an ex-girlfriend of mine. And believe me, she has no interest in your son. Betty is just trying to get back at me because Stephen chose me over her. All I'm asking you to do is talk to your son, because his family is falling apart. I know Stephen listens to your word." Everything you've told me hasn't touched me in the slightest. But for my part, I promise I'll talk to my son. I think this is the end of our conversation, because I have to go to the tourist center. By the way, I wanted to tell you that you should go to the gym too, since you have some extra pounds that don't look good on you. Adriana did not reply to her mother-in-law's barbs. The young woman hurried to leave Kathy's apartment. Adriana thought that a conversation between mother and son would at least change the situation, and perhaps after a dialogue with her mother, her husband would stop communicating with Betty. In the meantime, Kathy, 2 days after the arrival of her daughter-in-law, called her son and asked him to come alone. Stephen complied with his mother's request, and in the evening, having warned his wife that he would be late, went to his mother. And now the man sits opposite his mother in the living room and looks at her questioningly. The elderly woman smiled at her son and asked how his family relations were. Stephen shrugged and mumbled that it wasn't bad. And at the same moment, Kathy sternly mumbled that she would like to know the true answer. And at once added the daughter-in-law, "The other day she complained to me that you were truanting. Tell me, why should I listen to this from the village Lockhorns? I don't know why she came to you. I'm not seeing anyone at the moment, and I'm tired of it all." "Of what exactly?" the landlady asked calmly. "I'm tired of the constant whims of my daughter. I realize that she is sick, but I cannot bear to hear often her crying. I'm sick and tired of my wife constantly controlling my every move. You know very well I like variety, and I've been known to go out on the side. But she knew that when she got married. Now she wants a model family man who admires only her. If things are so bad, why don't you just get a divorce? Make her choose. Either Adriana accepts you for who you are, or you work things out and live each on your own. It's so easy for you to talk about it. I've thought about it before and even said I was entitled to my own space. So she started scaring me about taking her own life." The man said irritably and rubbed his temples nervously with his palms. "It is possible that your spouse is manipulating you with such actions. They are simple threats to make you live by her rules. Women often use such tricks, but they don't really mean to take their own lives. Mom, did you see her when she grabbed the knife? One more careless word from me and Adriana would have carried out her threat. And to test the fate of a wife who would or would not do such a thing. I have no desire to do so. Imagine her throwing herself out of a window in front of me. How would I live with that for the rest of my life? I'm in a vicious circle and I don't know how to get out of it. I just don't have the energy." "Okay, well, don't lose heart. I'll think about what to do about the situation." After talking to his mother, Stephen went home, where Adriana was waiting for him. The girl immediately, as soon as she saw her husband, asked why he went to Kathy. The head of the family did not talk about the topic of the conversation and lied to the chosen one that his mother asked him to come to fix the plumbing. Adriana immediately hinted that the lover lied, since in such cases the mother-in-law always called the master. They invited her son to help. Several days passed. Adriana still saw that Stephen continued to communicate with the former girlfriend, and she gave him a scandal, reminding him that he would kill himself if he did not stop behaving like that. The man, barely containing his irritation, explained to his wife that Betty herself was calling him and asking to talk to her. Adriana offered to let her talk to Betty herself. Stephen only wanted to answer the chosen one. His mother called and asked him to come over. The head of the family, after a short conversation with his mom, said that yes, they are talking on the subject. As soon as he returns from Kathy, Adriana, before leaving, asked what was the occasion for which his mother called him. At this late hour, the man pronounced that he did not know and would tell her when he returned. Soon Stephen was at his mother's house and told her about the altercation with his wife. The man told it all in an irritated tone. Kathy could see that his son really couldn't bear to live like this. The older woman shook her head and said, "I have an idea. Your wife is afraid of losing you. Perhaps she really loves you with some special love, that she is ready to stop living if you are not around. But you can send your spouse to a remote village where there is no cell phone service for a while, ostensibly to heal the daughter, but only for a long time. And it is quite possible that she will meet a man there, with whom she will fall in love. This is not a solution, as I sent her to the village to her parents. She lived there for a month and a half and dreamed, and only about me. With bitterness replied the son, wait to immediately cancel this option, which I suggested. First, when Adriana was at her parents', there was a connection, and we called every day, not letting each other forget about themselves. And secondly, she was only away for a month and a half. And in my case, I proposed to take her to the middle of nowhere for 6 months, while inventing a fairy tale for her. The conspirator mumbled Kathy and looked at his son with a testing look. The man hesitated. The landlady did not hurry him. She realized that Stephen had to think things over carefully to make a decision. About 20 minutes passed before Stephen spoke. He said to his mother, perhaps there is truth in what you say, and it is worth the risk of doing something like this. But where would I find such a place? And then how can I persuade Adriana to go there? After all, she will think that I live on her right side on purpose, so that I can have fun in my absence. On the subject of persuasion, then here is my motherly advice to you. For a start, become for a time approximately husband, at least for a month. Give Adriana gifts. Pay as much attention to your daughter as you can. You have to put your spouse's attention to sleep so that she believes that there is harmony in the family again. And by no means even socialize with yourselves. Tell them you're in the middle of a divorce so they won't bug you for a while. Now, as to where to find such a place, I think the ideal would be to take your spouse to a remote village where there is no communication, but there is a witch doctor. This way, you'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. On the one hand, maybe this nickname will cure Christina, and on the other hand, you'll probably achieve a painless divorce. And if it doesn't work, barely audible, said Stephen, then you will live and be happy with your Adriana, whom you chose to marry. You have no other option how to act in this situation. So do it. Stephen thanked his mother for her cooperation and was about to leave. Just then, he remembered that he had promised his wife to tell her why he had called his mother to his house. Kathy laughed and said that her son was still an unreasonable child, although he often changed partners. And then the older woman added that Adriana had to tell part of the truth. The man looked at his mother with incomprehension, who said, tell her that you had an explanatory talk with you about the fact that you do not devote enough time to your family, and also scolded you about cheating. Let Adriana think I'm on her side. Now go with God to your beloved. Stephen soon arrived home and was immediately approached by his wife about his trip to his mother. The man told his wife as Kathy had advised, and the head of the household instantly caught the mood of his wife, who was amused. Stephen thought to himself what a wise mother he had. Adriana, in turn, mentally thanked her mother-in-law that she did not stand aside and stood up for her. Time moved forward unhurriedly. Adriana could not enjoy family life. Her husband often began to say compliments to her, tried to help with household chores, often played with his daughter, which was previously very rare. All these changes in the behavior of the spouse caused enthusiastic Adriana, and she decided to thank her mother-in-law for her help. The young woman bought a bouquet of flowers and a small cake. Then she called Mother Stephen and asked permission to come over. Kathy said in a unified voice that it was not necessary to warn her about her visit, and she could come whenever she wanted. And a short time later, Adriana was sitting at her mother-in-law's house, saying thank you to the landlady. The elderly woman listened to her daughter-in-law and realized that her son had done the right thing, as the daughter-in-law believed that her spouse had completely changed. And as soon as Adriana stopped talking, the mother-in-law uttered, I am glad that you are doing well. Now you and your husband need to work on your daughter's health. Maybe find a healer. A lot of people are turning to them these days. You know, my husband just told me that the day before yesterday. You must have told him that, right? Yes, Stephen called and we talked about it. But you're a mother, and you're the only one who can make that decision. I would do anything for my daughter's health. Thank you again for everything. I can't believe we're having this kind conversation right now. Soon, Adriana returned home. She was anxiously awaiting her husband's return, and as soon as Stephen appeared in the apartment, she told him about her visit to her mother-in-law. The head of the family hugged her husband and said that he had made some inquiries and found a healer who lived in a remote village. Adriana looked at her husband with interest and asked him to tell about this healer. The husband sat down in a chair and said that in one village there lived an old man who helped people, but he had to live with him for a while to get rid of the disease. And the man added that there are rumors about this healer that he cures even hopelessly ill people. The girl, hearing this, smiled happily and told her husband that it was necessary to go to this healer. The husband was satisfied, nodded and replied that tomorrow he would contact this grandfather. A day later, Stephen said that he had to go to the old man's village to make arrangements for the healer to see them. Adriana sadly asked the chosen one whether it was impossible to call this man. The head of the family said that there was no connection where the old man lived. There was nothing left for the girl to do but to accept her husband's decision. It was 3 days before Stephen left for the country, and now he had returned home. The man told his wife that the healer was waiting for them. The woman asked how long she would be in the wilderness. Stephen replied that the healer would give her the exact answer. But the same man warned her that it would be at least 2 months for sure. Adriana became upset after these words. This was noticed by the head of the family and asked why she became sad. The girl replied, "We will be with you in separation, and I will not even hear your voice. Think not about that now, but about the fact that we will cure Christina, and you're gonna hear my voice every day. I'm gonna record your speech for you, but you'll get that tape when you're already living at Grandpa's house." Wow, that's a great idea. Now get your things together. We're gonna have to leave soon. You know, it's a good thing we decided to send you and your daughter to this healer over the summer. A few days later, Adriana, her husband and daughter were on their way by car to the village. The woman dreamed of only one thing: that time would fly by, and she would return home with a healthy daughter, and she and her husband would never be separated for such a long period of time again. And Stephen mentally thanked fate that everything was going so smoothly. Soon the car pulled onto the village roads and raced over the bumps. The man mentally thanked that he had to drive on such a broken road. The wife saw that her husband resented it and tried her best to calm him down. After a while, the car entered a small village. Stephen stopped at an extreme hut and asked his wife to stay in the car. He himself got out of the car. Stephen approached the house where he was chopping wood. There was a man in the yard. Adriana's husband approached the stranger. "Hello, sir. We're looking for Christopher. Where can we find him?" "Strangers. You can tell you've come to see him for treatment, but he's not here. It's Thursday, which is the day he goes into town every 2 weeks to get supplies. Today's the day. Can you tell me where his house is? You can tell he's not from around here. He has an old hut here, but he doesn't live here much. Christopher lives in the woods. He's a woodsman and a wanderer in one. Help me get my wife and child there. Christopher knows we're coming. A friend of mine arranged it, but he forgot to tell me that on Thursdays the healer goes into town, and I'll pay you well for this favor. I just don't have time to wait here for a healer. There's plenty of work to do in town. Well, if you pay me, that's good, but you can't get there by car. It's a boat ride down the river. And believe me, that's a lot of gasoline. And I'll tell you right away, I'm not going to wait there for long. I'll just take you back to the village. I've got a lot to do too. I can see that. I'll pay for the gas too. But please do not say anything unnecessary to my wife for this additional payment." The interlocutor looked at Stephen suspiciously and nodded his head. And then the man told him to wait for a while. In the meantime, Stephen went to the car, took out his things, and asked his spouse to get out of the car, explaining to her that they would now drive the motor. Adriana was surprised and wanted to ask him some questions, but he firmly replied that it was not the time to talk. 15 minutes later, the woman and her child were already getting into the motor. Stephen immediately warned that the Whigs would not go as he was seasick, Adriana asked her husband in farewell when he would eat them. The head of the household replied that he would arrive here in a month and live here for a week. This message from her husband cheered up the woman's spirits, and she sent him an air kiss. Soon the motor was pumping away from the shore. The woman clasped her daughter to her side and regarded a glimpse of the scenery. She thought about the fact that she would have to spend so much time without the person she loved. The thought made her sad, but the woman tried to shift her attention to the fact that her daughter's health depended on this trip. How long the boat ride Adriana didn't clock, but she felt that her legs had already clocked up. That's when the woman asked the man how much farther to the destination. The counselor replied that one more turn and they would arrive, and already Adriana and her child had landed on dry land. The man pointed to a tube and said that it was necessary to go up on a hill and there would be a healer's hut. Adriana bewilderedly asked the stranger if he would help her carry her things up to the hut. The man nodded reluctantly, picked up the bag and the child's backpack, and walked down the path. And the woman followed him, leading the child by the hand. As soon as they climbed the hillside, the girl saw an unassuming cabin. Then a sheepdog ran up to them and started barking loudly at her. Adriana was frightened and clung to her daughter, who was already crying with fear. The man softly said flatulence to the dog. "Ugh, don't scare the guests," and after these words turned to his companion. "I will lead you into the house, and you will wait there. I don't have time to stay here. I got a lot to do, and it's a long way home, as you've already noticed. Don't be afraid of the dog. The dog is smart." In a few minutes, the woman and the child were already in the hut. Adriana looked around the house and thought that this was where she would have to spend 2 months, maybe more. The woman was a little stunned. So since she thought she would be living in the village, but it turned out to be in the middle of nowhere. It was already evening when Adriana heard the sound of a motor. She realized that Christopher had arrived. The young woman mentally prepared herself for the meeting with the healer. As soon as the man entered the hut, the girl immediately said hello. The grandfather looked at the guest and not friendly asked what she was doing here. Adriana was confused by this question and inarticulately said that there was an agreement about her arrival. Christopher lit a makeshift lamp, illuminated the woman's face, and then said sternly, "And with whom I wondered that I will have a young person, and even with a child. You are doctors, the hotel, and my husband recently came to you to help us cure our daughter. He said he'd have to stay here for a while, and that's the instruction you gave him. That's the most heresy I've ever heard in my life. All right, I can see the raid already. You're not getting out of the house. You're gonna be here till morning, and then you're gonna show me all of your daughter's medical records. I'll see if there's anything I can do to help, and then we'll decide what to do with you. One more thing, nobody made any arrangements with me about you. Now I'll quickly prepare dinner, then we'll put the baby to bed, and you'll tell me everything in detail. But maybe my friend made arrangements with you through an acquaintance, not directly." With tears in her eyes, said the woman, "I have already explained to you that I did not have such a conversation on this topic. Let's understand everything a little later." After these words, the man began to sort out the products that he brought from the city. And then he made a small fire outside, where he piled sausages and potatoes on a frying pan. And after that, Christopher invited the woman and her daughter to have dinner. Soon Christina was put to bed, and the elderly man asked to tell how the woman found herself here. He listened to the guest's story and began to clarify what Stephen had said about him. Then he asked the grandfather a few questions that interested him. "Tell me, my dear, if your husband had made an arrangement with me about you, why did I not meet you then? And also, why didn't your husband himself bring you here and wait for me? I don't know. Perhaps you had urgent business and had to leave, and he didn't come here because he's been seasick since childhood. Don't you find your own answers funny? What do you want me to say? I don't understand what's going on." Crying bitterly, the young woman said, "Calm down." The grandfather whispered further, so that Adriana would not hear. "But it seems to me that I understand everything. The next morning, the old man got up very early. He went to the lake, which was not far from the hut. The grandfather caught fish and boiled some soup, and then went to wake up the woman and the child. Christopher entered the house in a cheerful voice and said that it was time to get up and have breakfast. Adriana did not immediately realize when she woke up. Where was she? The woman looked around confused and immediately remembered yesterday. Adriana wished the healer a good morning and hurried to her daughter, who had already opened her eyes. The elderly man offered to wash her face, guessed from standing water in a bucket, and invited to breakfast. As soon as everyone had eaten, the forester asked for medical documents. He studied them for a long time and then said that there was hope for recovery, but the treatment needed to be done in stages. Adriana looked fearfully at Christopher and told him how long it would take. The interlocutor, smiling, replied that it would take at least 6 months. The woman shrieked and said, "We can't stay in this wilderness without civilization for so long. There are no necessary conditions for a small child to live here, and I am not forcing you to live here. You have to make your own decision. Do you want your daughter to get well or not? That's up to you. I can tell you this about the conditions. During the war, people lived in worse conditions, and mothers would do anything to cure their children. But I have a husband who will worry about me." With tears in her eyes, said the woman. Husband said, "Come on, tell me about your life with him, while I prepare a potion of herbs. For your daughter, only one agreement, that you tell the truth and without any exaggerations." The woman lowered her head and began her story in a quiet voice. The man, meanwhile, was pulling out various pouches from the right basket, which he spread out on a makeshift section on the board. From the outside, it might have seemed that the healer was only busy with his work, but it was not so. Christopher listened attentively to the girl, and as soon as she was silent, said, "You know what I'll tell you, dearie. It will sound harsh, but it's true. Your whole life with this Stephen is a misunderstanding. And believe me, you're only here because your husband didn't know how to get rid of you. So when he found out I was helping people, he decided to keep you here. I can even say that your husband is not a stupid man, because he chose a village where there is no communication, so that in the near future you could not contact him. I don't believe that. Stephen and I have an excellent relationship lately. I've even made contact with my mother-in-law, even though I thought it would be impossible." She exclaimed in a passionate tone, "Maybe it can't, and your mother-in-law just has a cunning mind. Well, I will not argue with you. I can offer you only one option to live here for a month. I'll be tutoring your daughter during that time. And you wait for your husband, who said he'd visit you. Then we'll see which one of us was right in our speculation. It's up to you. You tell me to take you now. I'll do it, no problem." The woman thought for a moment, and then realized that there was some truth in Christopher's words. She agreed to the older man's proposal and immediately asked what she had to do. The man laughed in response and said that the only thing she would be required to do was to cook, and if there is a desire, then watch over the vegetable garden. The girl looked at the forester in amazement and asked a question, "Do you have a vegetable garden here?" "Of course, I live here almost all the time. I only go to the village on Saturday with an overnight stay to receive the sick who occasionally come there. Now I'm going, and I'll show you my grounds." It had been a week since Adriana and her daughter, living in the forest wilderness. The woman tried not to think that her husband could have acted in the way the witch doctor had written. She thought there had been a misunderstanding. It even occurred to her that her husband had simply mistaken the healer and brought her to the wrong person. Adriana waited until a month had passed, and she had traveled to the village to see her husband. The week before she met Stephen, her grandfather did not arrive from the village alone. Adriana and Christina watched Christopher walk out onto dry land. In doing so, he pulled the goat behind him on a rope. This scene made the girl and the woman laugh. They watched as the old man tried to pull the animal onto dry land. It turned out, while doing so, it bumps and vomits loudly. As soon as the elderly man managed to do it, then he lowered himself to the ground and panting, said, and I thought that the most stubborn animal is a donkey. Turns out I was wrong. This goat, Adriana asked curiously, why climb into this animal? The old man grinned and answered that he had long dreamed of a goat because the steamy milk is good for people at his age. And then the man added that Christina also needed to consume this product. Adriana marveled at the words of the healer because he had never brought a goat before. And as soon as the girl appeared, he immediately bought the animal and brought it here. A few weeks passed as the woman lived with Christopher. During this time, she learned how to fish, how to milk the goat. The elderly man himself prepared herbal collections that he gave to the girl from day to day. It was exactly 1 month after Adriana separated from her husband, and the woman started talking in the morning about going to the village. The forester did not interrupt and suggested that they set off immediately. Soon Adriana and her daughter and grandfather were already in the village. They came to the only road that went from the town to the village and sat down on a fallen tree. Adriana often climbed up to see her spouse's familiar automobile, but it was still gone. Hour after hour passed. There was already a bus that came here once a day, but there was no Stephen there either. The woman looked dejectedly at the road and intuitively realized that she would not see her husband today. Adriana turned to Christopher. Perhaps my husband had arrived earlier when we were on the road. He must have waited for us, and without waiting, left. I don't know what to do now. If you want to spend the night here in my house, I'll take you back to town tomorrow. But my daughter still has to drink your potion for a month. Maybe in a month we'll sail early to the village, and I'll meet my husband. I'm not sure, she suggested. Have it your way. And now it's time to go to our lair to make it before dark. Time moved on, and another month of Adriana's life in this godforsaken place was approaching. A few days before going to the village, the woman had asked an elderly man why he was dwelling. Here an old man sighed sorrowfully and pronounced that it was a long story. Adriana touched the woodsman's arm and said that she had plenty of time. She asked him to tell her about his life. Christopher made himself comfortable on her and began his story. Christopher was born in a family where his parents worked as doctors, and when he grew up, he also chose the specialty of medicine. But only the young man decided to become a paramedic. He was invited that he would rush in an ambulance to save someone's life. And in a short time, Christopher graduated from the educational institution and got a job. The young man worked a year in an ambulance, and then he got a call. He went to the exit of the patient was a 19-year-old girl, Clara, who had a heart condition. She was rushed to the hospital. As the girl was being wheeled on a gurney to the hospital, Christopher suddenly shook her hand and told her that she would be fine. After this call, several days passed, and the young man could not forget the eyes of that girl, and he decided to visit her. The man easily recognized the ward where the patient was lying, and soon stood near the girl's hospital bed with a bag of fruit and a bouquet of flowers. Clara immediately recognized the paramedic and asked him, "What are you doing here?" "I decided to visit the pretty maiden." Don't say flattering words that you don't believe yourself. In my orphanage, they used to call a lock a lid to my face. They're stupid people who didn't see your beauty. And then Christopher, with the girl's permission, sat down next to her, and they began to talk. Initially, the young man told about himself, and then asked the new acquaintance about her life. She was embarrassed and said that she did not have much information to tell about herself. But Christopher insisted on his own, and the girl said that she did not know her parents, as her mother abandoned her in the maternity hospital. After that, she went to an orphanage, where she spent her childhood and adolescence. And after the state allocated her a one-room apartment, and she then went to medical school. After this visit, Christopher more than once came to the girl, and when she was discharged, he himself took from the hospital. From that time, the young people began to meet a month after meeting. The guy confessed his love and offered his hand and heart. The girl responded with consent. And as soon as the man heard the word beloved, he said, "You are my marriage cap for life, and I won't give you to anyone. But there is one thing. I know that you work part-time as a nurse at night. Well, you're quitting tomorrow. That kind of work is not good for you. You study in the morning and work at night. What do you say, future husband?" Soon the couple applied and then had a modest wedding. Christopher moved to live with his wife, and the young people began to master family life. At first it was not easy, as there was often not enough money, but the newlyweds tried not to fight about it. And strangely enough, they succeeded. After a while, she graduated from college and got a job as a nurse, and at the same time, Christopher expressed a desire to become a doctor of homeopathy. He entered the institute by correspondence, and after some time acquired a profession, on which he began his labor activity. And at the same moment, he learned that his wife was in a position. For the couple, it was a joyful event. They were already dreaming of a baby. After a while, Slaga gave birth to a healthy baby boy, who was named John. The son grew up a healthy boy to the joy of his parents. When John was 3 years old, he was enrolled in kindergarten. Christopher thought that he was the happiest person because he had a woman he loved and a son he loved, as well as a job that gave him pleasure. As the years went by, when John turned 14 years old, his grandparents passed away suddenly within a year. Christopher then moved with his family to live in his father's apartment. It was decided to rent out the one-room apartment and save the money for a summer house. Some more time passed, and John graduated from school with a silver medal and then entered medical school. The parents of the young man were happy for their son and dreamed that he would become a highly qualified specialist in the future. However, the happiness of the family broke overnight. John began to feel ill when John was studying in the 3rd year. The woman was examined and a brain tumor was added to the heart disease. Christopher, as if was crushed by this diagnosis, but the man in no way showed it to his spouse. Soon she was put in the hospital. She lay there for some time, but the attending physician said that it was better to take the woman to a Moscow clinic. Christopher, having collected his savings, immediately went to the capital. The woman underwent many necessary procedures. A lot of money was spent, but nothing helped. She was getting worse day by day. The son demanded that his father take his mother abroad, and Christopher was already ready for this. He sold his car, as well as the dacha, which had recently been purchased, and was preparing for the trip. As he was approached by his wife, who said, "Don't go abroad. I will not survive this trip. You are a medical professional yourself, and you understand everything. I don't have much time left. It is better to leave these finances, son, and do not get angry at him that he insists on traveling abroad. He's still a young and hot guy. As they say, life doesn't burn him. Don't talk nonsense. We'll get you back on your feet," the man said firmly. "Don't talk about it. Try your own strength to cure me. They say love heals. Maybe you can do it. I just want to spend my last days with you and know that my 2 favorite men are doing well." Christopher looked at the woman he loved and tears involuntarily ran down his eyes, which he could not stop. He realized that she was telling the truth about the fact that his wife had only a few days to live, but it hurt him that his beloved knew about it. After all, she's a doctor. And Clara, seeing the tears of her husband, quietly said, "Do not mourn for me if I go to the next world, then with a peaceful soul, because we lived a life worthy. You better buy a house somewhere and let me spend the rest of my days there, where you will feed me with healing creatures." "All right, my love, I will." Christopher told his son of his decision. John, when he found out that his father was going to go to the backwoods instead of abroad, was furious. They had a big fight between them, and in the meantime, Christopher quit his job, and he was already the head of the hospital there. And then he found a small village where he bought a small house and moved there with his wife. The woman lived in the village for a little over 6 months. Christopher prepared a potion for his wife, but realized that it was all useless. And often at night, when the chosen one fell asleep restless son, he went out into the yard and quietly whimpered because he could not change the situation. Died in the early morning, but before that the woman managed to say that she loved her son and Christopher very much, and also asked her husband to bury her in this area. She said it was beautiful and easy to breathe. After these words, she took a deep breath and fell asleep forever. Christopher fulfilled his wife's request and stayed here for good. He did not want to leave his native and beloved man alone after 2 years, as he did not become a wife. A man in the city learned the courses of a forester and got a job in the forestry, having moved into the wilderness. After this story, Christopher looked at Adriana, who was sitting, breathless, and tears were streaming down her face. It was as if the young woman could feel how this older man had gone to any lengths to be with his beloved forever. The forester touched Adriana's arm and looked at her carefully. The girl did not know what to say to this man, nor could she, since there was a lump in her throat. Christopher patted Adriana's hand and said that the time was late and it was time to go to bed. A few days passed, and Adriana and her grandfather and Christina went to the village again. The woman did not really hope to see her husband again. She didn't understand why she felt this way. The forester's story kept replaying in her mind, and Adriana involuntarily thought that it was Christopher's story that prevented her from believing that her husband would appear before she got into the motor. The girl suddenly inquired of the elderly man, "Does the son know that it was Clara who wished to settle in the village?" The grandfather looked sadly at Adriana and shook his head negatively. And then he heard another question from the woman he was talking to. "How often do you see John? We parted in an uneasy relationship. I've lived here for almost 12 years now, and in that time, John has been twice. Every 4th year he comes for 3 days. My son told me himself that he would come every 4 years. Why that number, I don't know. He's supposed to come next summer." Soon the man, woman, and child were already in the village and sitting in the tree again. Adriana did not jump up to see if a car was coming along the road. Then a man passed by them who was taking Adriana and her daughter to the place where the healer lived. The girl told this to Christopher, who immediately stopped the fellow villager and said, "Do you not remember? Prokopovich took this person with a child to me a couple of months ago." "I remember, of course. What happened? Tell me how he acted. I can voice it in front of the young lady." "You're not sure?" asked Lawson. "You can, and you should," Adriana said boldly. "He was a strange guy. He paid double cab fare and told me not to say anything to his wife. I thought he was coming with us to take his wife to her destination. He's got some kind of seasickness thing going on. Any reasonable man wouldn't let a beautiful woman go alone with a stranger." "You see what he did," Lawson said. Christopher looked at Adriana, who smiled sadly, and then said that it was time to go back to the goat. And then she added that it was very difficult to milk in the dark. The woman took her daughter by the hand and went first to the river. As soon as they reached the motor, the forester turned Adriana to face him and said, "I understand that you have made conclusions for yourself. What are you going to do?" "Treat my daughter further. You said that 2 months to drink from Varia, and then a month of rest. That's 2 months gone. Now we'll take an active vacation." Trying not to cry, mumbled a young woman. "Do you mean that you are ready to live here for a few more months?" "Of course I am. It's all for my daughter's health. You don't understand. As in your life story. I've had my whole soul ripped out of me. I would have done anything to live with Stephen. I couldn't imagine living without him. And I realize now that he doesn't need me or my daughter. After all, a loving man would have wanted to know how his wife and daughter were living all this time. And here is silence. You left everything for your beloved and came here. You had a prestigious position in the city, surely a good position in society, and you even the desire of the woman you love went to conflict with his own son. And I have nothing to expect from Stephen, since I'm nothing to him. I'm sure this man is now tumbling around with my ex-girlfriend, and he's free to keep it that way. What's important to me right now is to cure Christina, and then we'll see how I move on. You need to think about your decision with a clear head, and they're emotional right now. Now let's go home. It is really uncomfortable to milk in the dark," the old man said in reply. The next morning, Adriana was the first to get up. She went out of the hut and looked at the nature. She liked to contemplate the forest and breathe in the fresh air. And at that time, Christopher approached her quietly and asked her how she had slept last night. The girl turned to the older man and answered that she had slept better than ever. And then the forester asked, "Now you must decide for sure whether you will stay here or be taken to town. You need to know that now, because very soon summer will be over and fall will come. It can be hard to get out of here. It's often hard to get out here. It rains so hard that the river overflows its banks, and in winter there is a blizzard that you don't want to show your nose from your hut. I told you yesterday I'm staying. You taught me how to fish, and now it's time for me to learn how to hunt. Although I guess it's not really my thing. If you've made up your mind, you're a good girl. Now it's just a matter of building a barn for the goat, making hay, and of course, buying you appropriate clothing for the season. There's something for you in my late car stuff, if you're not squeamish, of course. Christina, on the other hand, will have to buy everything new. Of course, I won't be squeamish. What are you talking about? You know, I feel bad. I don't even have the money to pay for it. Oh, wait a minute. Here's the engagement ring and the gold earrings Stephen gave me. You could pawn all that jewelry and you'd have money. Stop talking nonsense. I have the means. How much do I need on my own? I haven't spent much over the years. I wanted to give it to my son. I gave it to him, and he gave it back to me. So save your gold for a rainy day. Next Thursday, we'll go into town, do a little shopping. We'll get Christina a doll and buy her some books. And I made the Barbie nursery myself. It won't be worse than the store ones. Time flew by. Autumn passed, and then winter came. Adriana enjoyed watching the seasons change, and in each month she found its own charm. What did the latter man often talk about? The elderly man listened to her interlocutor and told her that she had a talent for writing. Because of the way she painted colorfully the seasons, soon it was spring. The man started the vegetable garden. Adriana was helping him with it. Christina also demanded that the adults give her a job. Christopher, in order not to offend the child, gave the girl millet and asked her to pick it. Initially, Christina did it with passion, but soon she got bored with it and demanded a shovel. This statement puzzled the forester, and he promised the child that as soon as Thursday came, he would buy her a children's set of vegetable gardeners and set aside a special place for planting. Spring flew by and summer came. The young woman already realized that it was impossible to stay here forever. In just a couple of years, Christina would have to go to school. Adriana knew that Christopher was thinking about it, too, who had already gotten used to having Adriana and the little girl, whom he loved as his own granddaughter, living next to him. So Adriana decided that it was time to talk to the forester about her return to town. She was going to do it in the morning, but as soon as she got up, she saw that the old man was going shopping. And she damned their news to herself, since she had completely forgotten that it was Thursday and her grandfather was going to town. The elderly man asked what to buy, and the girl quickly wrote a list of groceries, which she held out to Christopher. Soon the forester sailed off to the motor. The woman decided to clean up the hut, the more so her daughter was busy drawing. The girl collected half and raised the floors, then washed everywhere and looked over her work. After that, Adriana began to prepare the first course. She habitually made a fire and put water on the fire in the column. Somehow she heard the roar of a motor. The girl thought that another fisherman went fishing. However, the motor swam to the shore and a middle-aged man came out of it. The stranger looked at the young woman with surprise and asked what she was doing here. Adriana was outraged by this question. And Adriana said, "You are the one who owes me an explanation as to why you came here." "Good acquaintance. Well, I'll start by explaining. I'm here to visit Christopher's father." The young woman stared at the forester's son with all her eyes and then splayed her hands and said loudly, "So you are John," and immediately added sternly, "Good son. He doesn't know what's wrong with his father. And he comes once every 4 years. Wow, I'm getting hit on by a wood nymph. This is a very interesting situation. The man said with a chuckle, "I won't stop you from having fun. Tell the father that his son came," and he opened. John stopped talking as he saw Christina come out of the house. The man was silent for a while, but then he said, "And this is my father, who pretends to be a devoted husband to my mother when he has already made a child." After these words, John turned around and went to the motor. And immediately afterwards I heard, "Such asses as you, it is necessary to search for more. Your father is a golden man who still loves Clara. That's the only reason he lives here and doesn't move to the city. And you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking so badly of your own father." "What did you say? You don't know anything. Dad brought Mom here when the doctors could have helped her." And the man was interrupted at the same moment by Adriana, who said in a calmer voice, "Shut up, ignoramus, and listen to what I'm about to tell you. Your mother knew she was going to die soon, and it was she who persuaded your father to bring her here. I don't know why I kept it from you, Christopher, but I can tell you with certainty that I have never seen such love as that between your parents." And then the young woman was already telling about herself, how the couple got here after they learned about each other and remembered their acquaintance and laughed. And then the girl asked what John hadn't said when she interrupted him. The man smiled and said that he wanted to inform his father that he now had his own clinic, and at the same moment the couple heard a motor pull up, out of which Christopher got out with his bags. The elderly man saw his son and wept, and at the same time John rushed towards him and began to apologize for being such a stupid man. Soon Adriana was leaving the Forester, but not only in the company of his daughter, but also John. The healer's son promised his father that he would show the girl to specialists and in the near future report on the results of treatment. And as it turned out, healing courage actually helped Christina, since the tests turned out to be good. Several years have passed. During this time, Adriana divorced Stephen and married John. They had a child together. It was a boy who was named Ignat. The couple took turns telling Adriana's parents during the summer, and then going to the countryside to visit John's father. Only now Adriana realized that she had met a worthy man, whom she loved with all her heart, and was confident in him in every way. John felt the same way, and often recalled their unusual acquaintance, which had almost turned into enmity. And on one of the days of such memories, Adriana said to her husband, "You know, I really want to go to the city where I started college. That's where Christina was born. And I promised I'd show you those places. What's the big deal? You promised. You keep your promise. We'll go through this town, especially since we're on our way to your parents' house, and then to my father's, right?" Happily said the woman and kissed her spouse on the lips. And soon the family was already driving a jeep in the town where Christina was born. The woman asked her husband to park the car and walk. The man complied with the request of his beloved, and in a few minutes the family was already standing on the street. Adriana corrected her sundress. Unshaven took Christina under the arm and offered to walk. John took the 4-year-old son by the hand, and they slowly headed down the street. Just then, Adriana heard a loud exclamation, to which she turned around. The woman looked at the man and recognized him as her ex-spouse. She coldly rolled her eyes at him and wanted to continue on her way. But Stephen exclaimed that he was glad for the unexpected meeting and began showering Adriana with compliments and said that he recognized Adriana only by the tattoos she had made for him, and then pointed at Christina and asked, "This is my daughter. Hear that, banker? At one time you took your wife's bored child to the middle of nowhere and left for a mistress. And now, years later, when there was a chance meeting, you decided to pretend to be a father. That's not gonna happen. Christina has been calling my husband, who is standing next to me, Daddy for a long time. And about the tattoo, thank you for reminding me to look at it soon. Now go on your way and forget about us forever."